Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Luffy fanfics, back with the amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Luffy Gather Fearsome Crew with Different Devil Fruit. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. In a little cottage, on the hills of the Fuchsia village located on Don Island in the Goa Kingdom, we find 6-year-old Monkey D. Luffy looking very confused. He wore a plain white shirt coupled with green shorts and simple sandals. His raven black hair was as messy as always, and his piercing purple eyes stared blankly into space. Ever since he could remember, he always felt as though something was missing. He lived alone in his little cottage, with Makino-nichan, the pretty barkeep at Party's bar, occasionally checking up on him and making sure he was taking care of himself. His grandpa stopped by every few months to spend time with him, but he knew his grandpa was a busy man and couldn't come very often. He never once complained though, he wasn't some whiny brat. Luffy spent most of his days running around, chasing butterflies or playing with the local wildlife. He's a boy with a huge sense of adventure and loved learning or seeing new things. He spent his nights reading the picture books Grandpa Garp and Makino-nichan bought him, often immersing himself in the content. Most would call Luffy an idiot, but he was not. He just didn't care about things that didn't interest him. He was very perceptive, for the most part, about certain things, which is why we find him sitting on the edge of his bed, looking lost as he contemplated the strange dreams that have been plaguing him. For a while now, he has been having dreams of a beautiful blonde woman with soulful purple eyes, holding her arms out to him to embrace him. It made his heart pang with a sense of loss that he didn't even know he felt at the thought of the pretty lady. She looked at him with such warmth and love that it made him long for her embrace. He didn't know if she was a figment of his imagination, or maybe a memory, but Luffy desperately wanted to know about her. Why was she haunting his dreams? What was she trying to tell him? And why did she have the same color eyes as he did? He wanted to tell his grandpa, but that might just earn him a punch to the head, which wouldn't be fun at all. Makino-nichan was busy and he didn't want to bother her with his problems. It was his birthday tomorrow, and he didn't want to cause unwanted tension on that day. He would be turning 7 and he couldn't wait to see what presents he got. With one final thought to the lady in his dreams, he bid the empty room a good night before turning in. "Happy birthday, Luffy," cheered Makino as she brought her favorite little boy into a tight embrace, smothering his face in her generous bosom, much to the jealousy of some of the men in the bar. "Thanks, Nichan," Luffy responded as he melted into her hug. He really liked Makino-nichan. She always had time for him. Not to mention she made the tastiest meals. After a few minutes of fussing over him, she presented Luffy with a neatly wrapped box, which he excitedly tore into, revealing a new picture book detailing the adventures of his favorite protagonist. He awarded Makino with a bone-crushing hug and a hurried thank you before racing off to his home to get started on it, leaving behind an amused Makino who smiled warmly at his retreating back. As he sat at his little desk, Luffy lost himself in the pages of his new adventure. He wasn't the biggest fan of reading, but there wasn't much else to do in such a quiet village. It's why he loved when his grandpa came by and told him stories of his adventures. He was so engrossed in his book that he almost missed the knock on his door. He looked outside and realized that the sun was almost setting. He completely lost track of time. He rushed to the door after a few seconds, thinking that it was his grandpa stopping by. He was disappointed when he was greeted by the sight of a nondescript courier. "Good evening, little boy. Could you get him for me, please?" the courier asked in a polite tone, trying hard not to sound like some creepy pedophile. Luffy just gave him a flat stare, which, for a 7-year-old, was pretty impressive. "I'm Monkey D. Luffy," he responded blandly. The courier just stared at him for a few minutes, before giving up, realizing that the little boy was indeed the one the package was intended for. After getting Luffy to sign off on it, he handed the package to the boy. It wasn't the biggest or the heaviest, but he expected the little guy to have a bit of trouble with it, just as he did, which was why he was a bit dumbstruck when he saw the boy easily carry the package away with one arm before turning away and closing the door. Luffy was both confused and excited at the package, confused as to who would send him something besides his grandpa and Makino-nichan. He knew it wasn't from his grandpa as it was neatly wrapped with pretty purple paper. If it was his grandpa, it would be messily wrapped in old newspapers. He actually had to stop for a moment and direct a flat stare at a wall at the extremely likely scenario of that happening. As opposed to his normal behavior, Luffy carefully opened this package. He didn't want to damage the wrapping too badly. It was something instinctual within him that made him cautious to ruin it. He didn't really understand why, but he was always one to trust his instincts. After unveiling the package, it revealed a medium-sized, ornate black metallic box with what looked like a red moon on it. It had a clasp that looked like it could fit a lock as well as a small handle that looked like it could be used to either lift it or hang it up somewhere. All in all, it looked like a treasure chest to Luffy, who was getting both excited and apprehensive at the same time. His excitement won out though as he opened the chest and peered into it. The first thing he noticed was an envelope with his name written on it in an elegant print. He picked it up and looked at the rest of the contents. It was mostly empty except for a handful of plain black books. They looked like those journals you could buy from the store. There was also a weirdly shaped fruit that looked like a blue pumpkin with swirly designs on it. He disregarded the contents for now and opened the letter. As he opened it, a picture fell out of the fold. He picked it up and turned it over and received the shock of his young life at the face that stared back at him. It was the same woman from his dreams. Her beautiful blonde hair was flowing neatly down her back and she was dressed in a simple white summer dress and gladiator sandals. She didn't look to be wearing any makeup on her creamy white skin, and her gorgeous purple eyes, the same shade as his, was alight with joy as she smiled at the camera, gently cradling a bundle to her bosom that had a tuft of black hair sticking out the end. Luffy's heart sang at the sight of the woman. Her smile brought him a sense of happiness and contentment that he couldn't understand. He needed to know more. He gently set the picture down and turned to the letter. His heart almost seized up upon reading the first line. Dear Luffy, my beautiful baby boy. It's hard to describe how painful it is for me to write this letter to you, knowing that I probably will never got to tell you the things you need to know in person. I can see you playing with the stuffed bear that I bought you and caught beside me as I write this letter, and the thought of not being there for you as you grow up in this cruel world fills me with despair. I so badly want to be there to watch you take your first steps and utter your first words, but as much as I want to rage about it, I know that you will be strong enough to face what may come. If you're wondering who I am, and I won't be surprised if you have never heard of me, as I don't expect that useless deadbeat of a grandpa of yours or his equally worthless son to ever tell you about me. Name is Sylvia, and I am your mother. I know you are probably wondering where I am, which is understandable. The fact that you are reading this letter means only one thing. I am no longer amongst the living. I know that it may hurt to hear that, having just gotten to know that you have a mother only for it to be taken away. I want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not being strong enough to bear the weight of my sins, for not being there for you when you need me the most. I detailed most of the information of my life, what I know about the world government and the Marines, as well as some pirates, in those journals I left for you. There is also information about certain techniques and abilities that you can train so that you are strong enough to face the storm that will be ahead of you. I also managed to get my hands on a devil fruit. To be honest, I kind of stole it from the Marine headquarters. They were planning on giving it to whichever new admiral managed to get promoted to boost his power. It is a Logia-class devil fruit, the Goro Goro no Mai. I know that won't mean much to you at this point, but as you read the journals I left to you, it will make a lot more sense. I don't want to overload you with information that you might not fully understand, which is why I numbered the journals for you to read in that specific order to fully comprehend the information contained within. I know you may be a bit confused, or maybe you don't like to read, but I beg of you, please read those journals seriously. I want you to know what kind of place the world is in the dark side of it. I know people may think I'm crazy for telling a 7-year-old this information, and you may even end up hating me for destroying your innocence. But I can live with that as long as you are happy and safe. What you need to know about me is that I am a very important person to the world government. As you read more, you will fully comprehend just how important the world government, and by extension the Marines, have a twisted sense of absolute justice. It was something I didn't agree with, and regardless of my position in the government, a lot of people didn't look favorably upon me for it. I don't want to color your perceptions with my bias, but I will tell you of some of the incidents that I witnessed as well as what happened to me. I want you to take that information and go out and find your own meaning and understanding of it. Some of what you read may fill you with anger, or maybe even hatred, but I want you to promise me to never give in to it. I don't want you seeking revenge or anything silly like that. What I want for you is to live, my darling son, live and be free. Never be afraid or ashamed of who you are, and scream your name to the heavens if you must. As I said before, people didn't look at me in a favorable light, especially the higher-ranked members of the government. They wanted me to act more like someone befitting my position, but I wasn't some passive girl. I like to think I was strong. I trained hard every day to get to where I was, and I was proud of my strength. Most people overlooked my activities, even though they frowned at it, my family included. But the birth of my son, of you, was something that they took the greatest offense to, especially considering who your father is. I will tell you about him in my journals. I'm sorry to say, though, that I don't really love him, and I doubt that he loves me. It was just a silly mistake on my part, fueled by hormones and anger at my family. But that one mistake led me to the greatest achievement of my life. You. I want you to know, Luffy, even though I consider the act of getting together with your father a mistake, I don't consider you one at all. A lot of people will call your existence a sin, and say that you should have been put to death at birth. I want you to know that, regardless of what those idiots think, you are not a sin. You are my beautiful baby boy, my crowning achievement, my pride and joy. Giving birth to you was the happiest moment of my life. I can still remember the day like it was yesterday. It was late at night, and the red moon was hanging in the sky. While some would see that as a bad omen, I knew it meant that you were destined for greatness. How could I not? You are my son after all. Holding you in my arms for the first time filled me with a sense of accomplishment, knowing that I gave birth to such a wondrous being. It was love at first sight for me the moment I laid eyes upon you. I know I don't have much time left in this world, and I know you might hate me for what I'm going to do and for my own weakness. Like I said before, I can live with that. As long as you can find some use in what I've given you and be strong enough to survive, to live, then I can go to my death with a smile on my face. Even if you hate me or are ashamed of me, know that I love you with all my heart and I will be proud of you regardless of what you become. This is the end of what I need to tell you. But don't be sad, Luffy. I want you to smile that adorable smile that I fell hopelessly in love with. Remember, knowledge is power. Take what I give you and turn it into your strength. If you want to turn the world on its head, then I will support you. And if you want to live life as an ordinary citizen, I will support that too. But you are my son, and I know you well enough to know that a simple life is not something that will satisfy you. Train hard, eat right, and always be mindful of your manners. Find a nice girl in the future, or maybe even girls. I know my baby boy is manly enough to charm anyone. Just make sure to give me lots of cute grandbabies. I can barely find the strength to finish writing this, but this is goodbye for now, my love. Know that I will be watching over you. Go out and be the man I know you will be and never let anyone stand in your way of you or your dreams. I love you, Luffy, now and forever. Your loving mother, Sylvia. Luffy couldn't stop the tears that were flowing from his eyes as he read the letter. He had a mother, and she loved him. His heart soared at that thought. He gently placed the letter back in the envelope after reading it once more, a massive grin blooming on his face. He always wondered about his parents, as he saw other families around the village. But his grandpa always dodged the question, and Makino Nichin didn't really know anything about his family. After a while, he just gave up on asking, as it was clear even to him that his grandpa wasn't going to tell him anything. But no, he knows. He knows his mother's name, what she looks like, and most importantly, that she loved him. That alone filled him with an indescribable strength. He hurriedly pulled out the journal marked as number 1 and diligently started to read. He read throughout the night till the break of dawn, never stopping once other than to change books. He drank in his mother's words like a man dying of thirst who just found an oasis. Every word, every sentence that he read, his face contorted further and further in anger and hatred. He couldn't believe what he was reading. It filled him with disgust. He always had to listen to rants about how his grandpa would turn him into a strong marine. But after reading this, he would rather die than become one. He wanted to scream in anger and rage at the injustice of it all, but he bottled it up till it turned into cold indifference. His mother begged him not to give in to anger and hatred, and he will obey that to the best of his abilities. He knew, though, in his heart, that he will never become a marine or work for any branch of the world government. He didn't want to be an ordinary citizen either. He wanted freedom and adventure. A small grin slowly crept on his face. The only thing left for him to do was to become a pirate. Thanks to the instructions left behind, he had enough to make himself strong enough to take on any enemies that may come his way. And while he wouldn't go out of his way to antagonize them, if he does come across some corrupt marines, there's nothing stopping him from dishing out some pain and humiliation as well as appropriating some of their goods. His mother did say that she will be proud of him regardless of what he becomes. Maybe she realized that piracy was something that he was destined for. Nevertheless, he has at least 10 years or so to train himself in the techniques and abilities left to him as well as the devil fruit his mother gifted him. Being a simple pirate is not enough fuel for his ambition. No, if he is going to be a pirate, anything less than standing at the top is unacceptable. He wanted his name to ring throughout the world. He wanted to be the man with the most freedom on the seas. It was in that moment, unknown to the rest of the world, that a legend was born. Monkey D. Luffy vowed to himself that he will become the Pirate King. Those who would dare stand in the way of his destiny will be crushed under the overwhelming weight of his ambition. In a medium-sized dinghy, lazily floating along in the vast expanse of the seas in the East Blue, a 17-year-old Monkey D. Luffy was casually lying on his back in the little boat with his hands on the back of his head for support and his left leg crossed over his right knee. He looked a picture of boredom. It's been a long 10 years for Luffy since that life-changing day that he received the priceless treasure from his mother. He looked back fondly at those memories. They were filled with happy times of him helping Makino Nichin in her bar, as well as learning proper mannerisms from her. It was there that he met the traveling pirate Shanks and that boisterous crew of his. Luffy instantly liked those guys and was well liked in return. He spent a lot of time bonding with them, especially Shanks, listening to stories about their voyages and the battles they fought. Luffy was enraptured by their tales. In his mind, that was what he wanted. To have a close-knit crew, a family, and go on exciting adventures and fight exhilarating battles. He never knew his father. In terms of having met him, he of course knew who he was thanks to his mother's journals. He didn't hate the guy. He didn't believe in judging people without having met them first. but he didn't really love him either. In his mind, his father didn't really do anything that made Luffy care. Until so, he will remain somewhat indifferent to him, treating him like the stranger that he was. That being said, while he never knew his birth father, he oftentimes wondered if the time he spent with Shanks could be construed as such. He didn't really have a male role model in his life. His grandpa was a borderline sociopath and the mayor was a bit of an ass. Shanks treated him like he imagined a father would treat his son. He knew he may have been stretching it, but it was enough for him. He treasured the bond he made with the man, and he could see in his eyes that Shanks probably left something similar. He made a promise to find him on the Grand Line, to meet at the apex of the world and stand as equals. It was a promise that Luffy treasured. Suffice to say, Garp was not in the least bit amused at Luffy being friendly with the infamous red hair Shanks and his crew, which is why he dumped him in the mountains with a bunch of bandits led by Curly Dad. The old bandit wasn't pleased in the slightest at having to raise another brat for Garp, her hands already being full with the other one, but conceded nonetheless, as one just doesn't say no to Garp. That led to the first meeting between Luffy and the freckled strawberry blonde tomboy menace known as Portgas D. She did not ingratiate herself with Luffy upon their first meeting. With her trust and anger issues, Luffy wasn't one to allow people to walk over him either, nor would he grovel for friendship from someone who clearly didn't want it. The volatile relationship between those two spelled a horrible time for Daden and her family, and provided a great deal of amusement to Makino, who thought their hate relationship was adorable. Fortunately, they were able to get over their issues and become friends quickly, often playing in the forests of the Goa Kingdom. It was an encounter with the pirate Blue Jam and the fiasco of the Grey Terminal that led to the booming friendship between Luffy and Anne. Unfortunately, it was the death of another close friend that really brought them together. They were almost inseparable from then on. It was also a bittersweet moment for Luffy, who awakened the power within him, something that he was trying to do for a long time with little success, from the grief that he felt at the loss of one of the few friends he had. It was something that further drove how corrupt the world truly was to him. That event, along with revealing their fathers to each other, allowed Luffy and Anne to further bond, evolving their relationship to sworn sibling. Anne, while being antagonistic at first, soon became protective of Luffy to an extreme degree. It got to a point where people would get their kneecaps broken if they messed with Luffy. It honestly freaked him out at first, but slowly came to accept it as one of her more lovable quirks as time went on. While he didn't need to be protected, he allowed her to have her moments where she so just to appease her protective nature. Naturally, he wasn't any better in that regard. More than a few of the boys on the island ended up taking mysterious beatings with no memory of it and often being left in shallow graves. They all coincidentally were perving on Anne at some point when she was blossoming into a beautiful woman in the midst of puberty. Suffice to say, Daden, Makino and Anne all knew what happened to those boys, but kept their lips closed to spare Luffy the embarrassment he may feel if they were to tease him for it. Makino found it adorable, and even Daden thought it was cute the way they protected each other. It was a tear-filled goodbye when Anne set off on her journey, and she made Luffy promise to find her on the Grand Line when his time comes. Naturally, while all these events were happening in his life, Luffy never once slacked off in his training. While he had to hide what he was doing, even though it hurt him to do so from the people he cared about, it was a somewhat necessary evil in his eyes. The less people that know about the information he has, the less chance of someone, more specifically his grandfather, finding out. He still loved his grandpa very much and would forever be thankful to him for the protection that he afforded Luffy. But after reading his mother's journal, he was a lot more apprehensive in terms of what he said or asked in Garp's presence. His grandpa was a hero to the Marines, and that alone made Luffy weary. He knew his grandpa would never hurt him, but still kept his guard up just in case those around his grandpa dug a little too deep and come across something that they shouldn't have. It's the same reason that he didn't eat his devil fruit right away. It would have been disastrous if Garp found out about it. Luffy would have been dumped at the nearest Marine base for training and induction. For that reason, Luffy bided his time. He was originally going to wait till he set sail to eat it, but a golden opportunity presented itself to him when his grandpa came home with a prototype handcuff in his jacket. After getting a bit tipsy, he overheard him tell Makino Nichin that it was a new type of handcuff made of Kairoski, a substance that renders devil fruit users incapable of using their ability, as well as weakening them. Luffy saw his chance and discreetly stole it when his grandpa was passed out and put it with the rest of his stash. When Garp left again to go to headquarters, Luffy got to work on his project. He carefully separated the handcuffs, before using whatever little sculpting skill he had to redesign the outside of the cuff with paint and engravings, turning it into a bracelet. It was something he was quite proud of. He immediately ate his devil fruit and was amazed at the additional power that he could feel at his disposal. He added the training of his devil fruit abilities to his timetable and was quite creative in the application of it, in terms of the different techniques he thought up. Of course, by constantly wearing the bracelet around when he wasn't training didn't let anyone know of the dangerous power that he possessed. It was a win-win for him as he also built up his resistance to Kairoski to a small degree. He still couldn't fully use his devil fruit, but some passive abilities still remained with him. The biggest difference was that he didn't feel like the life was being drained out of him, which is what he originally felt when he strapped the bracelet on. It was progress in his mind as no he wouldn't be taken by surprise if someone managed to get him with Kairoski. He could still use his regular strength to a degree to find a way out. It wasn't just training his body that he did either. For his 13th birthday, he received another gift, this one being a lot longer. It was odd when he unwrapped it to find a breathtaking black sword. It was a sword belonging to the katana family, being a little longer than a regular katana but shorter than an odachi. It was pure black with 3 upward curving groves on the blunt side. The handle was wrapped in black leather with 3 purple diamond shapes on either side of the handle. The guard was in the shape of a manji. All in all, it was a badass sword and Luffy's eyes were literally shining with glee when he laid his eyes on it. He recognized it immediately. It was his mother's sword, Migetsu, one of the 12 supreme grade swords. He knew he definitely needed to learn how to wield the beautiful sword. It just made people more badass to have a sword. He also carried around his precious chest that contained his mother's journals as well as other important things he's picked up over the years. As previously stated, we find Luffy lazily lounging in his dinghy as he floats aimlessly in the ocean. He stared blankly at the sky above, not really caring about what was going on around him. As he looked out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a whirlpool that his boat was heading straight into. He let out an annoyed exhale at the disturbance of his thoughts and slowly stood. He had changed a great deal physically over the years. He now stood at an impressive height of 6 feet 1 inch. He was clad in black leather pants with black biker boots on his feet. His gleaming silver belt buckle had the head of a snarling demon on it. On his torso he wore a black, high-collar leather trench coat that flared out at the bottom, reaching just below his knees. He wore no shirt underneath with the top portion of his coat exposing a bit of his well-defined chest and had the dragon fang necklace that his sister got him around his neck. On the left breast area of his coat was a red moon emblem emblazoned upon the leather. He thought it was a pretty badass look. He let his raven black hair grow out, reaching past his shoulders and stopping in the middle of his back. He had the small portion that framed his face on the right side in a single, long braid, which ended with 2 purple beads at the end point. The 3 women in his life always had fun playing with his hair, making crazy braids or weird hairstyles for fun. He always allowed them to amuse themselves with his hair. To complete his ensemble, he carried his sheathed sword in his hand, giving him quite the dangerous vibe. He liked it. As he eyed the whirlpool, he knew he needed to abandon the boat. Luckily, he didn't have any sentimental value to it, so he had no problem ditching it. The problem was where he would go. He closed his eyes and focused his senses. He could hear numerous voices nearby. 2 large gatherings of people. One group was giving off a lot more negative feelings than the other. He decided to take the more docile group as he didn't want any unnecessary trouble this early on. With nary a whisper, he transformed into a blue lightning bolt and shot up into the sky. Using the clouds, he jumped from one cloud to the next till he got to the spot above his destination. In a lot quieter fashion, he zipped into one of the empty cabins on what looked like a passenger ship. This was one of the more out-of-the-box skills that he thought up for his devil fruit. He could already move at the speed of light thanks to his body basically being made of lightning. Using the cloud cover, he could probably travel anywhere, but it would drain him if used for extended periods of time. But that was fine with him. He didn't plan on using it to travel the world. He wanted to do it the old-fashioned way. The skill was handy for sneaking into places or making quick getaways. As he took stock of the room, he decided that he would lay low and see how the scene would play out for the time as he sensed the more volatile of the group slowly approaching the passenger ship. He would decide his course of action afterwards. As he exited the empty cabin, he leisurely made his way through the lower deck of the ship, taking care not to bump into anyone official. He didn't exactly have clearance to be on this ship after all, and while he could probably neutralize every single person on this ship without lifting a finger, he long since decided that sometimes a little subtlety worked a lot better in these situations. Which isn't to say he wouldn't brute force his way through things if push came to shove, it's just what people in his family seemed good at after all. In his mind, he imagined Garp laughing uproariously as he smashed in the skulls of whatever enemy pirates he came across. That guy was the poster boy for brute force if there ever was one. Even his mother, from her stories that he read in the journals, was a crazy battle maniac. Damn, just thinking about the fucked up people he's related to, by blood or relation, was kind of depressing him. Oh well, he wasn't the sanest guy around either, so there's no use dwelling on it. He spotted a lot of people in fancy suits and cocktail dresses, coming to the conclusion that this was some kind of high society gathering. He spotted a pretty orange-haired girl who, to his sharp eyes, looked out of place in terms of body language. He overlooked her though, as it wasn't any of his business. He made his way out onto the deck and casually leaned against the railing as he peered out into the ocean. He immediately spotted what he was looking for. He had to take a moment to prevent himself from gagging. It was a hideous pink ship with stylized red hearts painted onto the sails. The Jolly Roger consisted of a sideways-facing skull and crossbones with another red heart in the middle of the skull. And to put the metaphorical cherry on the cake, it had the upper body of a swan as a figurehead. A giant fucking swan. What the hell was wrong with these people? It looked like that ship just sailed out of Barbie's vagina. It made Luffy almost physically ill. It was a front to everything pirates stood for. Initially, he was planning on leaving these guys to their own devices, but now he needed to punch something. As the gears turned in his head, a terrifying grin broke out on his face. He had no doubt that his name would be plastered across wanted posters soon enough, but racking up some good PR before the shit hits the fan couldn't really hurt him. These people looked to be socialites, therefore they had a somewhat impressive social circle to exchange stories and gossip. Making a lasting impression on them can only help his cause. He doesn't really care much about playing a hero, but for now, he'll suppress his annoyance to put on a show. The lookout of the spotted the pirate ship soon after and immediately alerted the rest of the ship, causing mass hysteria and panic amongst the guests. Luffy just shook his head at the predictable nature of humans. Instead of remaining calm to try and figure a way out, they panic and look to save only themselves. It was the sad truth of the world. He heard one of the sailors identify the pirate ship as belonging to Iron Mace Alvida, a female pirate worth 5 million bully. In the East Blue, it was just above average as far as bounties go, but Luffy knew that it was basically worth peanuts on the Grand Line. As the ship got closer, they launched ropes with hooks at the end which burrowed into the wood of the passenger ship, which gave them a solid base to cross over and invade. While this was happening, Luffy bravely walked forward, which eventually drew stares from the rest of the occupants of the ship, who stopped and stared at the tall boy in black walking to his death. The pirates smirked to themselves when they saw Luffy. "Looky here, boys. We got us a pretty boy trying to be a hero. What say we cut him up real good? Lady Alvida will surely reward us for our great work." One of the grunts smarmed out, much to the vocal acceptance of his equally slimy peers. Luffy didn't really rise to the bait. Why would he? These guys looked like your cliché faceless grunts that he read about in his stories. He probably wouldn't even break a sweat taking them down. There was no use bantering with such trash. He decided against using his more flashy abilities and decided to keep it simple for now and use his raw strength to do most of the heavy lifting. As the fodder were busy gloating and flexing their puny egos, Luffy blurred forward. It looked like a blur to regular people, but Luffy wasn't even trying. It was probably the slowest he could possibly go. Years of brutal training is hard to overcome, and holding back is more challenging than he thought it would be. The first grunt ate a vicious knuckle sandwich that caved the right side of his face in, barely registering the agonizing pain before he lost consciousness. The rest of the invaders barely even had time to blink before they were dismantled by rapid punches and swift kicks, courtesy of Luffy. He wasted no time in disposing of the trash and almost had to stop himself from yawning at how pathetic these guys were. His overwhelming power and speed shone through as it was evident that these pirates had no training whatsoever. They were merely idiots who got their hands on some weapons and decided to wave it around for some reason. He was the last man standing, compared to his adversaries who were whimpering in pain on the ground. The passengers on the ship were left dumbstruck, watching a 17-year-old boy swiftly dispatch a group of about 30 full-grown pirates in the span of about 20 seconds. The shock soon gave way to jubilation as they cheered for their savior. Luffy just shook his head at these morons. He didn't really care about their adulation, but the publicity may help him in some way in the future. He spotted a chubby pink-haired boy out of the corner of his eye who was trembling like a leaf and eyeing Luffy with a look of intense fear and apprehension. There was a loud crash that shook the very foundations of the ship, kicking up a lot of smoke. As the dust cleared, the source of the mini-quake was revealed. It was a colossal facsimile of what Luffy assumed was supposed to be a woman. She wore a pink shirt that looked to be straining over her horrifically bulky frame. She had white pants on her relatively smaller legs along with a pair of red shoes. She wore a blue captain's coat over her shirt with a white hat with red plumage on her head. Her black hair was stringy and oily looking, and her face was the stuff of nightmares coupled with the unattractive freckles on her face. To complete her look, she carried around a hulking piece of metal that looked vaguely like a mace. Once again, Luffy had to stop himself from blowing chunks all over the deck floor at the sight of this disgusting creature. "What the hell is going on here?" she thundered, her ugly face contorting into an even more nauseating expression. Alvida-sama, he's too strong for us," one of the beaten men managed to whimper out. The now identified Alvida didn't take too kindly to that and promptly swung her mace down at him, crushing his skull. The civilians on the ship turned green at the gruesome sight and many lost their lunch. The pink-haired coward became even more terrified if that was even possible. Insolence, she roared before turning to the pink-haired boy. Kobe, why yes Alvida-sama. The now identified Kobe stuttered out. Who is the most beautiful woman on the seas? She questioned threateningly. Kobe was about to open his mouth and answer but was beaten to the punch by Luffy. I didn't know that whales could talk. Looks like you can learn something new every day. Luffy commented nonchalantly, much to the growing horror of the civilians, who were familiar with the dangerous reputation of Alvida, and the cabin boy Kobe, who looked at Luffy as though he just his death wish. The vein on Alvida's forehead started to throb wildly at Luffy's comments, and her repulsive face contorted to an even more hideous sight as she looked at Luffy with murder in her eyes. You can glare at me all you like, it won't change anything, he said, with a look of faux pity directed at her that infuriated her even more. So you're the insolent punk that beat up my men. You don't look like the pirate huntress Kuina, she stated with a sneer on her face. Beat up is such a vulgar term. I'm more inclined to say that I re-educated them in the manners that they seem to be sorely lacking. I'd like to say I'm sorry, and if I could find a way to do so and sound sincere, I would, he replied without a shred of remorse. Alvida started to tremble in fury at the insolent boy in front of her. Without delay, she hefted her stupidly large mace, which slightly impressed Luffy, though not by much, and brought it down on his head with frightening force. It drew a terrified squeak from the still cowering Kobe and gasps of horror from the spectators. They expected the boy's cranium to be smashed in with his brain matter smeared all over the deck. Instead, they were left comically gaping, with their eyes bulging out of their sockets and their mouths wide open, as Luffy effortlessly caught the swing and held the mace in place, his expression never changing. His grip was inherently superior to that of Alvida's, as evidenced by her struggle to free her precious mace from his clutches. Luffy just quirked a single eyebrow at her in amusement. Normally in situations like this, a protagonist will deliver a cool line like "this is gonna hurt me a lot more than it will hurt you ... but that would be a blatant lie because this is going to hurt like a bitch. I would clench my teeth if I were you," Luffy advised with a pleasant smile on his face as he cocked his left hand back before unleashing a bullet punch that nobody could track, with the exception of the thunderclap that sounded out from the impact as Alvida's grotesque body contorted around Luffy's fist before being shot off far into the horizon, leaving a twinkle in the sky. Luffy put his hand above his eyes and squinted in that direction to try and see where she flew off to. It would have been a comical sight for the passengers if they weren't so flabbergasted at his raw strength. After taking a few more minutes, Luffy dusted his hands off before turning to, what looked like to him, the captain of the vessel he was currently on. "Thank you, young man, for your courage and heroics that undoubtedly saved us all," the captain said humbly as he held his hat to his chest before giving Luffy a small bow. Luffy just smiled kindly to the old man, a genuine one this time, before replying, "There's nothing of it, sir. I was just in the right place in the right time." "Nonsense. You probably saved our lives from that vile woman on this day. There must be something we can do to repay you," the captain insisted, much to Luffy's internal joy. It was exactly what he had hoped for. "Well, now that you mention it, I did kind of lose my boat in that whirlpool back there along with my provisions. I actually swam to this ship as it was the closest one by, hoping I could buy some food and maybe a small boat," he replied with a well-rehearsed face of sincerity. While he did feel a little bad for manipulating these people, it wasn't really something malicious. He did after all do them a huge favor and probably saved their lives. He didn't think that slightly bending the truth would do much harm. "Nonsense, young man. We will give you a small rowing boat for free. Then, stock up one of the emergency boats with provisions for at least a week," he commanded, causing his crew to salute before hurrying off to get the job done. The captain turned to Luffy once again. "I'm sorry, I didn't even get your name." "It's Luffy. Monkey D. Luffy." As Luffy was preparing to board the boat the captain gave to him, he was interrupted by the squeak of something unintelligible. He turned to see the pink-haired boy from before staring at him in awe and fear. He quirked an eyebrow at the stuttering boy, urging him to get on with whatever he wanted. "I wanted to thank you ... for freeing me from Alvida. No Alvida," he managed to stutter out. Seeing Luffy continuing to stare at him, Kobe decided to elaborate. 2 years ago I got on what I thought was a fishing boat. Turns out it was a boat belonging to the Alvida pirates. I've been as good as a slave on that ship since then. Luckily, my skill in navigation made it so they didn't kill me, but it wasn't a pleasant experience either." Luffy continued to give him a flat stare, making the boy sweat a little, before asking him an obvious question. "If you didn't like it, why didn't you just leave?" Kobe gave him a horrified look in response. "Impossible. Alvida would have found me and killed me. Just thinking about it makes me shiver," Cody shrieked out hysterically, causing Luffy to look at him with a little annoyance. "So not only are you a coward, but you're also a weakling too," he pointed out, causing arrows with the words coward and weakling to pierce Kobe's chest. "I really hate people like you." Luffy finished with a pleasant smile on his face. Kobe slumped down with comical tears running down his face at Luffy's brutal assessment. Luffy-san, are you a Marine? Kobe timidly asked. Luffy momentarily went stiff at the question before letting the tension flow out of his body. No, right now, I'm not anything. I'm taking the time to scour East Blue for talented individuals, he replied. What for? Kobe inquired. Luffy got a shark-like grin on his face at that question. For my pirate crew, of course, he replied, making Kobe pale in realization. You're a pirate. But I'm just starting out. I'm currently looking for a crew. You should be thankful, coward. You can tell your grandchildren in the future that you were saved by the Pirate King, Monkey D. Luffy. Luffy declared with a grin on his face. Kobe just looked at him with a boggled expression. Pirate King. So you're going to the Grand Line. After One Piece. Impossible. They call it a pirate graveyard, you know. Not to mention all the others going for the same goal. Impossible. Impossible. There's no way. It's impossible. Kobe's rant was cut off by a swift knuckle to the head from Luffy, who looked at him in annoyance. I don't care if it's impossible. It's my dream, and I will follow through with it, and if I die trying, so be it. I won't give up because others think it's impossible. I will be the Pirate King, Luffy declared with such confidence and conviction that Kobe had no choice but to believe him. Anything else seemed illogical. He was awed by the willpower and dedication of Luffy. He felt some of that courage fill him up. Do you think if I tried, I could achieve my own dream? Which is, I want to join the Marines and catch bad guys like Alvida, Cody announced. He was still trembling a little, but he mustered up enough confidence to speak out his dream. Ho, looks like you aren't nearly as spineless as I thought you were if you could say something like that in front of a pirate, said Luffy, causing Kobe to squeak in fear. But I don't see why you can't achieve that if you're dedicated enough and willing to endure what comes your way. Kobe's face lit up in joy at the endorsement from someone he was beginning to admire a great deal. He was the strongest person that he knew, and he believed that he could become a strong Marine. You seem to be knowledgeable about these parts of the sea. Tell me, Alvida mentioned someone called the pirate huntress Kuina. Who is she? Luffy questioned. Code went a little pale again at the mention of that name. She's someone all pirates fear in these parts. A bounty hunter that's said to be a demon wearing human skin. She's ruthless and vicious when hunting her bounties, like a beast hungering only for their blood. From Alvida's information, she was last spotted in Shell's town. Kobe responded. Luffy suddenly got a manic grin on his face at hearing that description, making Kobe nervous as hell. A demon, huh? Tashishi. Sounds like a good prospect for my crew. The perfect starting point. To Shell's town it is then, he stated before finishing his packing of the boat. Kobe wanted to argue with him, to talk him out of potentially getting himself killed by the fearsome pirate huntress, but for the few minutes that he knew Luffy, he knew that it would be pointless. Instead, he asked another question, hoping he wouldn't get beaten up. Do you think I could get a lift with you to Shell's town? I heard there's a Marine base there and I was hoping I could try to get in, he questioned timidly. Luffy just raised an eyebrow before shrugging his shoulders. Sure, but you will have to carry your own weight, he stated, causing Kobe to break out into a happy smile. Thank you so much for your kindness, Luffy-san. Yeah, just don't get used to it. Now, I want to go find this pirate huntress before she's on the move again, so get in and let's get moving, Luffy ordered, before watching Kobe scamper onto the boat before the both of them set sail. After docking his boat, Luffy took a leisurely stroll through the town, occasionally stopping to buy a fruit. He had a black burlap sack that he carried over his shoulder containing the chest his mother gifted him. He didn't feel safe just leaving his priceless treasure on an unguarded boat. His new shadow, Cody, was diligently tailing him. While on the surface, it looked like a peaceful town, there was an underlying tension in the air that was almost palpable to Luffy's sharp senses. He immediately put his guard up. While he knew that there wasn't much threat posed to him here in the East Blue, being cautious never hurt anyone. He didn't want to become overconfident in his abilities, so he was on alert as he continued his trek before stopping before a huge stone wall, with the logo of the Marines on it. Well, Kobe, here it is. You are one step closer to your dream. I'm off to go see if I can find this woman named Kuina. From what I managed to gather from the townspeople, she's being kept locked up somewhere in this base, Luffy stated before taking a small leap and landing deftly on the edge of the wall. Upon looking into the courtyard, his eyes were met by a sight that took his breath away. There in the middle of the courtyard, tied to what looked like a wooden crucifix by a flimsy rope, was a woman. No, just describing her as a woman would be a crime. She had midnight blue hair that reached her lower back, tied in messy braid. She wore a plain black button-up shirt that constrained over her large breasts along with faded blue jeans that hugged her shapely hips coupled with black flats. Her icy blue eyes looked sunken and she had dark rings around them. For all her natural beauty, her countenance was quite gaunt. Her lips were chapped and her stomach looked to be caving in. All in all, she looked quite haunted. But that was just on the surface. Luffy's perceptive eyes picked up on her body language though. Despite the fact that she looked to be starving, her eyes screamed defiance. Her posture was primed and ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. He could make out the powerful and well-defined muscles beneath her skin. Even though she looked to be on her last legs, she looked every bit a warrior queen to Luffy's eyes. He broke out into an excited grin at the sight of her. She was absolutely perfect. He decided that he wasn't leaving this little island without her. He would have her on his crew one way or another. His contemplations were cut short by a sharp intake of breath from beside his as he spotted Kobe out of the corner of his eye. The boy looked to be in serious need of new underwear. That midnight blue hair and those cold blue eyes with that fierce expression. No doubt about it, that's her, the pirate huntress Kimishima Kuina, he uttered with a terrified expression on his face. Luffy shook his head at the cowardly boy before refocusing his attention at his future crewmate. She was special, he could see that. He wondered if she would be willing to join with him without him having to resort to dirty measures. He wanted his first mate to be someone he could trust his back to, and it looked like she could be it. He only hoped she wasn't some cocky asshole, but he doubted it. There was click of a ladder hitting the wall as a ladder was propped up beside Luffy before it was scaled by an adorable little girl, looking no older than 8. She reached the top and cutely put her finger to her lips, signaling them to be quiet before climbing over the wall and making her way to Kuina. Kobe was panicking and pleading to Luffy to save the girl, but Luffy just ignored him, hoping to see more of what was about to happen. He watched as the little girl offered onigiri to Kuina, who harshly turned her away. The girl never lost her smile though and continued to insist on her eating it. They were interrupted, however, by a smarmy-looking jackass with the ugliest haircut Luffy has ever seen in his life. He looked like a complete douchebag with his egg-shaped head. Just the kind of guy that Luffy took offense to. He didn't help his case when he snatched one of the little girl's onigiri, bit a chunk out, and then promptly spat it out before tossing the rest of her creations on the ground and stomping on them in a petulant display. The poor girl was on the verge of tears, and Kuina, Luffy noticed, had a murderous expression on her face. The worthless egghead then ordered one of the Marines to throw the girl over the fence, and while reluctant at first, the officer actually obeyed the order. Lucky for the girl, Luffy was on the scene, and he gently scooped her out of the sky and gently placed her on the ground before playfully ruffling her hair, earning a cute giggle from the girl. Luffy told her she should probably go home and that he would find her later on. Luffy looked to Kobe and noticed that the boy was in the middle of a moral dilemma after witnessing a scene that shattered his beliefs of what the Marines were supposed to be like. Luffy ignored him and turned back to face the courtyard. He would never consider himself a hero, but seeing these corrupt Marines, the kind he hated the most, attempt to hurt an innocent little girl like that for no other reason than to fuel his own ego, it really made his blood boil. Although he intended to keep a low profile, he couldn't ignore something like this. But first, he needed to speak with the object of his interest. He stealthily scaled the fence and swiftly made his way to her before quietly standing before her, silently observing her. Kuina noticed the shadow obscuring her and looked up to see a handsome-looking guy in black staring at her with the most entrancing pair of eyes she's ever seen. His piercing gaze sent a shiver up her spine for some reason. She wasn't sure if it was a good thing or not. She refused to show any weakness though and stared defiantly back at him. After about a minute of staring, she was about to open her mouth and give out a scathing comment when she noticed his eyes soften as he looked at her. Something in that gaze of his made her tummy flutter giddily. I won't ask you why you haven't broken out yet when those ropes are clearly not a match for your strength. I originally came here to recruit you to my pirate crew, but I decided to put it on hold for now. I can see in your eyes that you have something to prove. Whether it's to these Marines or to yourself, I won't ask. I won't question your resolve. I will be in town for a while. If at any time you are in danger, I will step in, Luffy said to her, much to her shock and bewilderment. She didn't know how to fully process what he just said to her when Luffy turned around and started to walk away. Wait, Kuina called out to him. The onigiri, feed it to me please, she requested. Her voice, even though it was hoarse from a lack of water, still had a beautiful lilt to it that was quite pleasant to Luffy's ears. He stared into her eyes when she made her request, seemingly searching for something, before smiling softly and gathering up the dirty onigiri from the ground and depositing it into her mouth. She grimaced as she chewed on it, having great difficulty. After finally swallowing it, she took a breath before facing Luffy once more. It was delicious, the best onigiri I have ever tasted, she declared. Luffy got the meaning behind her words and gave her an approving smile and nod that pleased her immensely for some reason before leaving his parting words for her. Good luck in your mission, Kimishima Kuina. I look forward to what else you can show me. As Kuina watched the back of the stranger disappear, she was left with a cacophony of conflicting emotions. She was never what one would call girly. She was a tomboy in her younger years, and even after blossoming into an astounding beauty, she never gave in to her more earthly urges. That being said, she did appreciate the few good-looking men that she came across, which is why she couldn't deny the physical attraction she felt to the mysterious stranger. He was a very handsome man. There was no denying that. But there was something about him that she couldn't quite put her finger on. Something about the aura around him that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. He had the eyes of an apex predator. Kuina was never one to shy away from a fight. In fact, she reveled in the feeling of battle. She also noticed the sheathed sword he carried at his side. But something deep and primal within her was warning her about the man. He didn't even seem to be making any attempt to hide his nature from her. It was something that baffled and unnerved her. Most people always have some kind of agenda in approaching her, whether it was to use her strength or wanting her body. But this man didn't seem to exhibit any of those signs, with the exception of him stating that he wanted to recruit her for his pirate crew, something that she never even considered doing before. But she couldn't deny that there was something in those eyes of his. Something that thrilled her. In her semi-delirious state, she couldn't quite pin it down and decided to put it in the back of her mind. She only had 10 more days to go before she wins this little challenge. Then she can go on her way, continuing her perceived journey to the top. Really, she ate all of it. The little girl, Rika, exclaimed excitedly. Her eyes were alit with joy at the information Luffy gave her. She sure did. She said it was the most delicious onigiri that she's ever had. Luffy added. The smile on the face of Rika was immovable. Kobe, on the other hand, looked to be supremely confused. I don't understand. I thought that Kuina was some kind of demon. He pondered. No, Kuina Nichin is a good person. It's all that stupid Helmappo's fault. Rika insisted before regaling the two travelers the story of the Marine base captain, Morgan, and his cowardly son Helmappo, along with the terror and oppression they wrought throughout this town. Kobe was horrified at the prospect of the Marines being corrupt, while Luffy didn't seem all that bothered, as he was expecting something like this. Rika then told her about how Kuina saved her from Helmappo's wolf and how she was unjustly arrested for it. Apparently she made a deal where if she survived 30 days tied in the middle of that courtyard without food, she would be released. Luffy just nodded to himself, now understanding why she didn't just break out when she could. It was a matter of pride for her. She was clearly a woman out with something to prove. He admired that about her, as he wasn't all that different himself. His musings were cut short as that egg-headed idiot, who he now knows is named Helmeppo, walked into the bar with 2 Marine officers escorting him. Luffy had to use all of his training and self-control to keep himself from walking over to that moron and stomping him into the ground. Helmeppo walked in like he owned the place and sat down with his feet on the table. Bring me a drink. Wench, I'm hungry as well, so we're all going to eat for free, he declared before laughing obnoxiously. The patrons of the restaurant were shooting him wary and fearful looks. Rika's mother, who owned the restaurant, quickly got to work in preparing his meal, hoping to appease him so that he would leave her family alone. What's taking so long? Hurry up, he petulantly demanded. As he sat there like some faux king, swirling his glass of wine, he nonchalantly threw out some provoking words. Oh, that's right. Since I'm tired of waiting, I've decided to execute Kuina tomorrow. Look forward to it, everyone. He finished with that annoying laugh of his. His gloating was cute prematurely, though, when an overwhelming sense of bloodlust filled the restaurant. The murderous intent shook the very core of those regular citizens, and even the Marines were barely holding themselves together. There was also a conspicuous wet spot that appeared on Helmeppo's trousers. Suddenly, as quickly as it came, it vanished. As Kobe looked around the restaurant, he noticed that Luffy was missing as well. Luffy had to work hard to keep himself from lashing out at that idiot. This further drove home the nature of some of the scum that populated the Marines, hiding behind their absolute justice to commit atrocities. He quickly scaled the wall of the base and found himself in front of Kuina once again. She looked up at him in confusion, wondering why he's back so quickly. There was something in his demeanor, though, that set alarm bells ringing in her head. His posture was tight, as if coiled, waiting to strike. You again. I'm here to free you, Luffy said. No, I have 10 more days to go, and I'm not about to let you ruin the work I've done. I'm almost there, she argued back. Luffy just looked at her and shook his head sadly. I'm sorry to say that you aren't going to last that long. The egg-headed one, I believe his name is Helmeppo, just announced, quite publicly I might add, that you are going to be executed tomorrow, he told her. Kuina had a look of shock and anger on her face. She couldn't believe it. For 20 days she endured the hunger and abuse hurled her way from these damn Marines, only to find out that they were never planning on seeing out their end of the bargain. It made her a little sick to her stomach to see how naive she had been in believing in their word. She looked up to the man, at a loss at what to do. He said he was going to free her, but he was a pirate. She would be labeled an outlaw if she accepted his help. But what other choice does she have? As she was in the middle of her dilemma, the voice of the man sounded out once again. Tell me, Kimishima Kuina, what is your ambition? He asked, getting a wide-eyed look from the girl. He just smiled at her in response. I can see it in your eyes. The thirst, the hunger to prove yourself. You have the eyes of someone with a weighty ambition. I know, because I see those eyes whenever I look into the mirror every morning. So tell me, pirate huntress, what is your greatest desire? What motivates you to swing that sword of yours? What is your dream? Luffy pierced her with an intense stare, one that she readily returned without flinching. Time seemed to stand still for a moment as these two stared each other down. Neither blinked. There was absolute silence. It was broken when Kuina moved her lips. A promise, not only to a late friend, but also to myself. My name would be heard throughout the world. I will stand at the top. I will become the greatest swordswoman in the world, she declared with the utmost conviction. She didn't even sound doubtful. She said it like it was an undisputable fact, already carved in stone. Luffy felt the smile on his face stretch from cheek to cheek at her declaration. Before he knew it, he threw his head back and let out an uproarious laugh in response. Kuina felt her face grow red in anger and humiliation at his response. It wasn't the first time this happened. Whenever she stated her dream, people would laugh at her. They would scoff and say that a woman could never achieve that position. Even her father, even though she loved the guy, he gently told her that as she grew older, she would be unable to withstand the blows of her male counterparts, no matter how skilled she was. He tried to be kind about it, but it only served to infuriate her, which is why she took her sword and left, journeying around East Blue, defeating anyone in her path. She would prove them all wrong. She would achieve her goal. It was the last thing she did. She was about to tear into the guy who dared laugh at her dream before he stopped suddenly to address her. Forgive me for that, but I couldn't help myself. I didn't think I'd come across someone like you in this part of the world. You and I aren't that different, Kimishima Kuina, he said to her earnestly. While her anger was still there, she was now a bit confused as to what he meant. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Monkey D. Luffy and I'm the man who will become Pirate King, he declared, causing her gape at his bold proclamation. He wasn't done though. I've already decided. I want you in my pirate crew, Kuina. We both have crazy dreams, but that's what makes it fun. And as the future Pirate King, if my first mate didn't at least become the greatest swordswoman in the world, I would be highly embarrassed. He finished with a smirk in her direction. Kuina's eyes widened in shock at his words. Her stomach started to flutter and her heart started to beat loudly in anticipation. She realized he wasn't laughing at her in contempt. He was laughing in happiness at finding someone he could relate to. But most importantly, for the first time in her life, Kuina's dream was acknowledged by someone. She finally recognized that look in his eyes. It was one of approval and acknowledgement. For Kuina, who went her whole life with people telling her that she would never be able to accomplish her dream, his endorsement of her ambition and the fact that he unequivocally seemed to believe that she could accomplish it was like a shot of adrenaline to her veins. She felt a smile bloom across her face. This was something that she never thought she would find. Regardless of what happens from now, you will be marked as an outlaw by these worthless Marines. Going against them in any way, even if you are in the right, will see to that. I don't really care much about that, and I can tell that you're a woman who doesn't care much about what others think of her. So I will ask you again, Kimishima Kuina, what will you do? There's only one path left and it's straight to the top. Come with me and we will turn this world on its head, Luffy declared with a smirk of anticipation on his face as he held his hand out to her. That doesn't leave me with much choice now, does it? You must be the son of a demon, she said ruefully, but there was no heat in her words as she grinned up at him. She already made up her mind a while ago. There was something different about this man, something that called out to her. The fact that he believed in her also played a large part of it. The absolute confidence she saw in his eyes, at himself, at accomplishing his dream and directed towards her made her tremble with excitement and anticipation. You're right, I don't care if it's as a demon or a pirate. My name will be heard throughout the world, and if you ever do anything to impede that, I will have you apologize to me at the end of my sword, she declared, although it was obvious to the both of them that she said it just for the sake of the moment. They both knew in their hearts that it would never happen. It was the extent to which they seemed to click with each other. There was no turning back for her now, not that she would anyway. She would follow this man to their rightful places, at the summit of the world. So what's our next move, Sencho? She questioned, causing Luffy's smirk to turn into a smile of happiness at recruiting his first nakama. And what a recruit it was. Well, I can't have my swordswoman walk around without a sword. Do you have any idea where yours is? He inquired. She felt a little shiver go down her spine at the way he said my swordswoman. The rightness of that statement was something she couldn't explain. Probably in the room of that weirdo, Helmeppo, she answered. Luffy nodded in response before taking in the direction of the base. Kuina looked incredulously at his back, about to call out to him to at least free her before taking off. Before remembering what he said when they first met, he trusted her to have the strength to free herself, something that made her smile. She didn't want to prove her captain a liar and promptly exerted her strength, causing the flimsy ropes around her to groan in protest before snapping. She got to her feet and took the time to stretch her body and work out the kinks from being in the same position for almost 20 days. There was nothing left to do but wait for her captain to return with her sword. Luffy expertly infiltrated the base, using his considerable skills and stealth to get in silently. He saw that most of the base was unguarded. He felt a lot of people congregated at the top of the base. He didn't want to look a horse in the mouth though and took off in the direction of the only other person in the base. He recognized the signature immediately and was going to enjoy caving his face in. He came to the stop in front of a bright pink door with flowers and butterflies decorating it along with a nameplate that read Helmeppo. He almost gagged at the extent of that guy's creepiness. He kicked the door in without haste. "Knock knock motherfucker," he called out, mentally giggling to himself. He's always wanted to do that. It was something he read in one of his favorite adventure books. Helmeppo looked like a deer caught in headlights at the intrusion. Because of who his father is, nobody ever bothered him in any way. He lived a pampered life with no consequences. "Who the hell are you? Do you know who my daddy is? I will have you." His tirade was cut off as Luffy appeared before him and delivered a swift kick to the balls, causing Helmeppo's eyes to bug out of their sockets and his mouth to open in a silent scream. Luffy then grabbed him by the hair and brought him face to face. Helmeppo would swear to anyone that listened that he was staring into the eyes of a demon. He knew that he was definitely going to need a change of underwear. "I was going to ask you where you left Kuina's sword, but I can see it in the corner of your stupidly girly room. I would suggest you get a hobby ... and maybe a testosterone patch as well," Luffy said before delivering a brutal headbutt. The crunch of Helmeppo's now broken nose echoed throughout the room. Luffy dropped the dead weight before walking over to the sword leaning against the wall. He recognized it immediately. It had a white sheath and handle with a gold oval guard along with a gray diamond pattern doing down on either side of the handle. It was one of the legendary Owaza Mano 21, Wadu Ikamanji. He just smirked at how fitting the weapon seemed to be for his first mate. A pure white katana to offset his black one. He grabbed the sword and made his way out of the room. He wasn't quite done though. He also took some of the ridiculously cutesy stuffed animals that Helmeppo kept in his room, goodness knows for what, along with a tiara. He quickly made his way to Captain Morgan's room. After breaking in, he used a static bolt to override the lock on the safe located under a hideously obnoxious painting of Morgan, before stuffing all the money he could fit into his chest. He also snatched up the latest batch of wanted posters. His final act was to strategically plant those stuffed animals and tiara into his safe along with an IU note that depicted a middle finger. He laughed at his handiwork before taking off. He felt the people on the roof beginning to panic before making their way to the courtyard. Looks like Kuina was discovered. Oh well, it wasn't like she was trying to hide or something. He swiftly made his way to Kuina before she got turned into Swiss cheese. He came out just in time to see a row of Marines pointing their rifles at his nakama, with that imbecile, Morgan, standing behind them directing traffic. Luffy wasn't going to be having any of that though. "Rankyaku," he called out whilst rapidly sending a kick to the empty space between the Marines and Kuina. A sharp wind blade cut through the air, digging a shallow trench in the ground. The Marines and Kuina alike stopped to gape at the inhuman feat. "I don't appreciate you pointing those dangerous weapons at my friend. If you value your life, you will not cross that line," Luffy warned, causing the Marines to gulp in fear. Clearly intimidated him. Kuina just looked at him with a little awe, still trying to figure out how he did what he just did. She snapped out of her daze though when he handed over her precious sword. She took a moment to enjoy the way it filled her hands. It was like reuniting with an old friend. "Another traitor. I'm surrounded by insolence. Kill these two worms. I will not have anybody daring to defy my greatness," roared out the supposedly infamous Captain Axe Hand Morgan. Luffy just looked at him with a deadpan stare. He wasn't impressed at all. The standards in the Marines were really dropping of any idiot like this guy could make captain. He was just a bulk of useless muscles, not even worth Luffy wasting another breath on. "Well, first mate Kuina, it's your time to shine," Luffy stated with a look of anticipation in his eyes. Kuina noticed the look and realized that her captain wanted to see her in action. From his posture, it was clear that he wasn't even expecting to intervene. It was a little thrilling to see the complete confidence he had in her. "Hi, Sencho," she replied, before rapidly crossing the space between her and the Marines, quickly getting into the guard of the one closest to her before delivering a slash to his chest. It wasn't fatal, but it certainly hurt like a bitch. He would need medical attention soon. The others, seeing one of their own get taken down, promptly charged her. It was to no avail though as she skillfully danced around their attempts to strike her. Her nimble footwork and superb reflexes kept her completely out of their reach, which she capitalized on by delivering swift and precise strikes with her sword to their unguarded bodies. Little by little, the large group of Marines started falling like flies, clearly completely out of their depth in terms of skill and intelligence as compared to Kuina, who was covered in quite a bit of blood from the numerous slash wounds she delivered to her enemies. Many of the Marines watching on started to tremble in fear. Finally understanding the fearsome reputation the woman garnered was no fluke. She was an absolute beast in battle. Fear started to override their bodies as they backed away from the scene. What are you worthless ingrates doing? It's only one woman. Are you so weak that you can't kill someone so pathetic? Morgan roared out in anger at him. Kuina glared in his direction at his sexist remark while Luffy just laughed in amusement. Even starved and barely rested, my swordswoman is too awesome for an entire marine base to handle. He cheered out, causing Kuina to preen at the comment. The belief and trust he had in her skills was absolutely intoxicating to Kuina. She reveled under the praise and acknowledgement of this man that she barely even met, but she didn't care. It somehow just felt right to her. See Captain Morgan, sir. We can't ... She's too strong for us. One of the nondescript marines managed to stutter out, his fear of the blood-soaked Kuina eclipsing that of his fear of Morgan. Many of the soldiers around him were nodding their heads in agreement. Morgan, upon hearing this, went silent. There was a vein visible on his forehead that was throbbing wildly. His grotesque physique bulged out and his eyes were bloodshot in utter fury. Those weaklings who think that, put your pistols to your heads and pull the trigger right now. I am the highest-ranking officer in this base, therefore everything I say is right. I am great. I will not have insubordination in my base. If I tell you to kill this pathetic woman, you will do so even if you have to die trying. Morgan bellowed out in rage, spittle escaping his mouth. He looked the picture of a mad dog at the moment. Luffy looked on dispassionately, and Kuina in shock, as the Marines actually made to follow his order and put their pistols to their heads. Most of them were in tears, but they didn't stop. Luffy just shook his head at the sheer idiocy that he was seeing. This is why he couldn't stand the Marines. Though he had no obligation to save these spineless maggots, he wasn't going to give Morgan the satisfaction that came with his, probably final, orders being obeyed. His distinctive purple eyes glowed slightly before his pupil shrank slightly. Suddenly an invisible shockwave passed through the courtyard. The soldiers, Morgan and Kuina, felt it on their very skin. The feeling of oppression, the unexplainable sense to get on their knees in obedience. It was an aura of pure dominance washing over them. Suddenly, as quick as it appeared, it was gone. Not without consequence, though. Every Marine in that courtyard that wasn't Morgan fell over in blissful unconsciousness, some foaming at the mouth. Morgan's eyes were bulging comically at the sight. His mind couldn't comprehend what he was seeing at all. Kuina wasn't faring much better. It was such a mystical thing to experience. The only people left standing was herself, Morgan, and her captain Luffy. It clearly wasn't Morgan that caused this, so it logically meant that Luffy had something to do with that monstrous presence. She looked back to him, causing him to look in her direction to send her a cheeky wink. She was absolutely floored. Her captain clearly had more to him than meets the eyes. This only proved that she made the right decision in following this man. Well, now that the fodder are out the way, I believe that the illustrious Captain Morgan here doesn't believe that he can be bested by a woman, Luffy commented, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He then turned to Kuina with a genuine smile on his face. Kuina, this man is a weakling who hides behind his men and his position. He isn't even worthy of breathing the same air as you. Trash like him should be groveling at your feet instead. This will be my first order as captain. Please educate the dear Captain Morgan here about the hierarchy of the world and show him his rightful place, Luffy ordered with a dark smirk on his face. The vicious grin that spread across Kuina's face sent a shiver of fear racing through Morgan's spine. Kuina felt her blood boil at her captain's words. Her insane bloodlust skyrocketed as she tensed in anticipation. She felt absolutely giddy. It was like the shackles came off her and she didn't have to hold back any longer. She never felt this free before. She would do her best to not make a liar out of her captain. Hi, Sencho, she affirmed before taking her stance. In that time, Morgan seemed to regain his bluster. I will make you insects regret ever hearing the name Captain Morgan. You see this axe hand? It was thanks to this hand that I rose in the ranks. I will use it to spill your blood all over this base, you worthless woman. Morgan screamed out before charging at Kuina like a wild bull. Kuina just let out a breath and relaxed slightly. Her captain had complete confidence in her and she wasn't going to make him regret that. She refused to lose to a low life like Morgan. As he closed in on her, she used her more agile body to twist out of the trajectory of his axe swing before her blade sung through the air, leaving a vicious cut on Morgan's left flank, causing his blood to spray out and him screaming in agony. The precision of her cut made it so that she cut just deep to nick the vessel. It would cause him immense pain the longer it went untreated, but it wouldn't cause death. Morgan pushed past the agonizing pain and spun around, attempting to decapitate Kuina with his axe. She anticipated this though, not to mention he was moving at a snail's pace and crouched low, allowing the axe hand to pass overhead before springing back up and using her momentum to deliver a brutal slash right up his chest with an uppercut-like motion. Morgan wailed in agony at the sensations he was experiencing. It was clear to Luffy and Kuina that for all his bluster, Morgan didn't really have a high pain tolerance. It was disappointing for Kuina. who was expecting a fight, but instead this buffoon had absolutely no skill whatsoever. In a last charge, probably his huge ego overriding his self-preservation instincts, Morgan made a full-on charge at Kuina, once again putting his full weight behind the swing of his axe. Kuina had to stop herself from rolling her eyes at this idiot and once again sidestepped his charge, causing him to stumble past her and embedding his axe hand into the ground. Kuina, seeing an opportunity, stamped on the back end of the axe, causing it to sink further into the ground before stomping on Morgan's forearm, breaking not only the support he used to keep his axe attached to his arm but also the bones in his arm. Morgan pulled his arm back, leaving the axe still embedded in the ground, screaming in pure agony. Kuina wasn't in the mood for mercy though, and sprung forward before delivering a multitude of deep cuts to his torso and face in the span of a few seconds. Morgan had no choice but to slump over, his body shutting down from the amount of pain he was forced to endure. Kuina was breathing a little heavy, tired from exerting herself after having been starved for 20 days. She looked behind her towards her captain and absolutely drank in the look of pride he had on his face, like he never expected any other outcome. She felt a happy smile come to her face before slumping down. Before she hit the ground though, she felt the strong arms of her captain hold her up, giving her a grin and congratulations, not at all minding all the blood on her clothes. "You must be starving. Let's get you some food. I know there's an excited little girl waiting to see you," he said, making her smile go wider. We currently find Luffy at the dock, loading provisions onto his boat in anticipation of setting sail. After Kuina defeated Morgan, she absolutely gorged herself on the delicious food made by Rika's mother. She apologized between bites, but nobody held it against her as she was starving. After having at least 5 helpings, she declared that she needed a shower and some new clothes. Luffy handed her a stack of bully, as much as she tried to protest against it, to get her stocked up on clothes and whatever other necessities she needed. Luffy was joined by Kobe, who was excitedly telling him that he was accepted into the Marines immediately due to the current shortage that they were facing. Apparently, Commander Ripper decided not to take action against Kuina for her actions, although he did warn her that it was probably a good idea to get off the island as soon as possible. It was fortunate for Luffy that nobody, with the exception of Kobe, even knew that they were pirates. Luffy was brought out of his musing by the sharp intake of breath and the sound of a body hitting the floor coming from beside him. He looked out of the corner of his eye and saw that Kobe had fainted. As he turned around, he fully understood why the boy reacted in such a way. Standing before him was a cleaned-up Kuina. Now that the dirt and grime wasn't marring her, you could see the beautiful milky complexion that she had. Her midnight blue hair was in an elegant braid that was worn over her left shoulder. She wasn't slouching in hunger either and stood at an impressive 5 feet 9 inches. Her clothes were very different as well, choosing to go a more traditional route in terms of a sleeveless black battle kimono with purple accents at the bottom that reached mid-thigh. There was also a design of a red moon on the right bicep, the same as the one on Luffy's coat. It had a plunging neckline, leaving her generous cleavage on display. She had on tight black shorts to preserve her modesty along with black high-heeled boots that stopped just below her kimono. She had a bracelet on her right wrist as well as blue teardrop earrings on both ears. All in all, coupled with the sheathed sword in her hand, she looked every bit the femme fatale, sexy and dangerous. "Well, you certainly clean up good, Kuina. You look amazing, not to mention dangerous. I like it," Luffy stated with a cheesy thumbs up in her direction, causing her to release a melodic laugh. She was glad to see her captain wasn't some pervert, evidenced by the fact that there was no lust in his eyes, just pure admiration. "Thank you, Sencho. So where are we headed to next?" she questioned as she climbed onto the boat. "Well, I heard Buggy the Clown was spotted in Orange Town, not too far from here. He has a bounty of about 15 million bully, the 4th highest bounty currently in East Blue, since we aren't officially pirates. There's nothing stopping us from turning that bounty in and earning some startup capital for our future exploits. Not to mention it would serve as great training. Hopefully we can come across some other exceptional people for us to recruit. There's no going back, no Kuina. Are you ready to take this world by storm?" Luffy questioned mischievously. Kuina just grinned back in response. "I don't regret it at all, Sencho. I will follow you wherever you go," she replied earnestly, getting Luffy to smile genuinely at her. "The world awaits us, Kuina. Let's set sail," he declared before letting the currents guide them off into the sunset, completely forgetting about Kobe, who was still twitching on the ground with a trail of blood flowing down his nose. There was a soft breeze in the air as Luffy and his newly recruited first mate Kuina ambled along the ocean on their quaint little boat. They were on course to reach Orange Town in a few hours, as it wasn't that far out from Shell's Town. There was a comfortable silence between the new crewmates as they enjoyed the tranquility. It remained that way until Kuina asked about something that had been on her mind for some time now. "Sencho, if you would forgive my rudeness, could I perhaps have a look at your sword?" she questioned politely. In return, she got an intense stare from Luffy that made her almost squirm in response before it melted away to his usual carefree expression. Kuina, you don't have to be so overly formal all the time. We're friends now, Nakama even. I won't bite your head off if you ask me something, Luffy said with a gentle smile on his face, causing an equally soft and meaningful smile to break out on her face. She was happy that her captain was such an agreeable man, just more evidence that she made the right decision, not that she ever doubted it. Luffy handed over the sword to her. She took the time to inspect the sheath and handle before unsheathing the sword, looking closely at the design of the blade and the sharp edge it possessed. She was visibly impressed. It's a beautiful sword, she commented, still entranced by the blade. Thank you. It's a Meidu, just like your Wado Ikamanji. Her name is Mugetsu. She is an irreplaceable treasure to me. She belonged to my mother, who I've heard was quite the beast with it in hand. Luffy replied with a serene smile on his face. He always got this way when talking about his mother and was happy to be able to share this little tidbit with someone else. Kuina, sensing the somber mood, was sensitive enough to understand that Luffy's mother was no longer amongst the living. In an attempt to change the topic, she questioned him once again. Are you any good with it? Her response was a happy laugh from her captain. I'd like to think I'm not too bad wielding it, but compared to you I'm an absolute novice. Everything I know about wielding a sword is entirely self-taught, so you can understand that I'm nowhere near close to being as skilled as you are, he stated with a little self-deprecating smirk directed at himself. Kuina was once again bombarded by the giddy feeling that accompanied her captain praising her. She wasn't sure if she would ever get used to it. Not that she was complaining. She absolutely loved the feeling. If you'd like, I can teach you how to properly wield it, Kuina suggested shyly. Luffy's face lit up at the suggestion. Really? Shishishi ... Then I'll be in your care, Kuina-sensei, he replied cheekily, causing her to laugh at his antics. But that will have to wait until we get a bigger ship. Sensei ... Back at the marine base, when those men were about to shoot themselves, there was this. I guess the best way to describe it was a presence that erupted around us that knocked them out. Were you responsible for that? Luffy became a lot more serious at her question. Yes, I was. What I used there was ability that most outside the second half of the Grand Line don't even know about. When we gather up the adequate number of crew members, before we set sail to the Grand Line, I will explain it to you all in detail as it's quite a lengthy one and I don't want to have to do it more than once, Luffy answered, which quelled Kuina's curiosity for the time being. She trusted her captain and would wait until he was ready to fully explain his mystical abilities. The rest of the time was spent making small talk as they casually sailed along, learning about each other's likes and dislikes, pet peeves as well as some their pasts. It was a bonding experience, one that they both enjoyed greatly, finding kindred spirits in each other. The time seemed to fly by as they were already nearing Orange Town. They could already see the outline of the island. They were a bit on guard though as they saw smoke rising from the middle of the city. Boom! A thunderous explosion rocked the island, causing another area to emit smoke. Luffy and Kuina stood in their boat, taking stock of the situation as they surveyed the approaching island. Clearly there was something going on, and it didn't look to be a good thing. Luffy could sense quite a bit of signatures congregated in the middle of the island. But other than that, the place was a ghost town. As they approached the shore, they were met with the sight of a pirate ship. They knew this thanks to the ostentatious Jolly Roger painted on the sails of the ship. They both recognized it immediately as the one belonging to Buggy the Clown. Luffy and Kuina broke out into equally terrifying grins, both filled with bloodlust at their good luck. They ran into just the guy they were looking for and he was a sitting duck in the middle of this town. After tying their boat to the docks, they made their way into town. It was a little disconcerting how empty the place truly was. It seemed that the residents abandoned the town as soon as Buggy and his crew set up shop. Their quiet walk was interrupted by an attractive orange-haired girl running towards them. Luffy recognized her immediately as the girl from the party on the passenger ship that Alvida attacked. She clearly wasn't some high-class socialite, as Luffy correctly guessed before. He didn't like the gleam that appeared in her eyes when she spotted them. Boss, there you are. I got the map just like you asked me to, but these guys are on my tail. Please take care of them for me, she called out to him, never stopping her stride as she disappeared around a corner. Luffy just turned to look at Kuina with a disbelieving look. Kuina had a look of anger come across her face at the nerve of that little coward. The three men that were chasing her immediately came to a halt in front of Luffy and Kuina. Looks like we hit the jackpot. That bitch stole our map, but now we have her boss. We can use him as leverage to get back our stuff. Not to mention he has a smoking hot babe with him. I'm sure she can entertain our boys for a few days. One of the men leered with a lustful glint in his eyes as he stared at Kuina. Said swordswoman felt herself shiver in disgust at the close proximity to these Neanderthals. She wasn't afraid of their threats as she knew she could wipe the floor with them in her sleep. She made to draw Wado but was stopped when her captain put his hand on hers. Don't taint your blade with the blood of such trash. They aren't worth it, he said before directing his attention towards the men, sending them a bone-chilling glare. I don't appreciate you leering at my friend. I will give you one chance to apologize and repent. It wasn't phrased as a suggestion, but an order. Something that only Kuina realized, as the Three Stooges were clearly too stupid to recognize the danger they were in and instead threw out their false bravado. "Heh, what's wrong, pretty boy? You think you can take us all on? Don't worry, if you're a good boy, we'll let you have a turn with." That was as far as he got as Luffy blurred from his spot before appearing in front of the loudmouth and caving his chest in with a vicious punch. The grunt was left to choke on his own blood as he went down like a ton of bricks. The other two were still in a state of confusion, their eyes not catching up with what was happening. They didn't have time to either, as Luffy appeared in front of the second grunt before delivering a rising kick that connected with the bottom of his jaw, causing the man to bite through his tongue. He couldn't even scream out in agony as blood filled his mouth rapidly. The final grunt was finally beginning to comprehend what was happening. But before he could take action, Luffy appeared behind him, hooking his right arm around his neck before pulling him backwards over his back, snapping the man's spine. The entire ordeal lasted less than 6 seconds before Luffy appeared at his original position next to Kuina, whose sharp eyes managed to track the entire thing even though all she could see was a blur. She watched on dispassionately as the men writhed in agony at the brutal beatdown her captain delivered. She wasn't the least bit disturbed by the casual display of violence, as she herself has administered such beatings before. One didn't become as renowned as she was in her line of work by keeping her hands clean after all. She was a little touched, though, that her captain was upset on her behalf at the crude comments these worms directed at her. After smiling and nodding to each other, they continued their march to the middle of town but stopped when they heard a voice call out, "Incredible, you're strong, aren't you? You won bare-handed against those guys who were armed to the teeth." The orange-haired girl from before stated with a fake smile on her face. Luffy could almost smell the fear that was radiating off her. She clearly understood that she bit off more than she could chew and was probably trying to ingratiate herself to him. "I'm Nami, a thief that robs pirates. Hey, why don't you join me?" she asked. "Sorry, not interested," Luffy replied with a flat stare before walking away, causing her to flush in embarrassment. Wait, why not?" she questioned with what she thought was an adorable put on her face. She had charmed and seduced many men with that look before robbing them blind. Luffy, however, didn't even budge his expression. He just looked at her like he was looking at a common insect, something that made her skin crawl. "Tell me something, Nami the thief. Do you know who I am?" he inquired. Said girl shook her head negatively. "What about my companion?" He received the same reply. "So you have never met us before, yet you saw fit to put us in the line of fire against those armed pirates. Luckily, my friend and I could take out guys like that in our sleep. But if we were just a regular pair of travelers, I would have likely been killed and my partner would have been captured and most probably raped, because you thought it was a good idea to allow us to take the fall for your thievery. I'm no saint myself, but I would never involve innocent bystanders in my endeavors, especially if it could bring them harm. From your casual demeanor, I can tell this isn't the first time you've done something like this. Therefore, I don't want to be associated with the kind of person who can do something like that and laugh it off afterwards. My friend and I are in a hurry. I would say it was nice to meet you, but that would be a lie. Goodbye, Nami the pirate thief," Luffy finished before walking off with Kuina right beside him, her head held high at the words of her captain. He kept finding new ways to impress her. Nami was left to look at his back as he walked away, a profound sense of loss filling her. His words cut her deep and hurt a lot more than she thought it would. She realized that he was right. She did endanger innocent civilians. After a minute or so of self-loathing, she snapped out of her funk. Maybe that was true, but she had a mission to complete. She couldn't stop now that she was this close. She could beg for forgiveness to whatever deities were out there after she frees her village. For now, though, she needed to get moving. Luffy came to a stop in the town square, Kuina right beside him. He could sense the large congregation of people in the restaurant a few floors above them. He knew this was where the Buggy pirates were. He looked to Kuina and nodded, getting one back in reply, clearly understanding what he meant. It was time to get the show on the road. "Oi, big, fat, red nose, get out here," Luffy yelled out after cupping his mouth. Kuina face-palmed beside him. But if you looked closely you would see the amused smirk on her face. "What did you say, you flashy bastard?" screamed a nasally voice from the balcony of the restaurant. Out came one of the strangest people Luffy and Kuina have ever seen. He wore a short-sleeved shirt with red and white horizontal stripes coupled with pale green trousers and a green sash around his waist, as well as curly-toed shoes on his feet. He wore a captain's hat, a red scarf around his neck, as well as a captain's coat with white fur lining. The weirdest part about him, though, was his face. He had on makeup giving him the look of a clown, literally, as well as a big, red nose. It was hard to take the guy seriously with the way he looked, but they didn't want to take any chances with this guy. I said, "I'm looking for a guy with a big, fat, red nose, but it looks like I found him," Luffy replied. The scowl on Buggy's face could be the stuff of kids' nightmares if they ever saw it. He had the whole killer clown vibe going for him. Unfortunately, He also seemed like a real doofus. Who are you calling Big Nose, you asshole? Men, prepare the buggy ball. Our guests need to learn a lesson in respecting their superiors, Buggy ordered. His crew got to work in pointing a huge cannon in the direction of Luffy and Kuina, who didn't look the least bit perturbed. In fact, they looked a little bored, as evidenced by the yawn Luffy emitted, which he soon apologized to Kuina for showing poor manners. She forgave him though, stating that she was also struggling to stay awake. Buggy was becoming more and more infuriated at the nonchalant way they were treating him and his crew. They clearly didn't see him as a treat. He would show them why they should be afraid. Buggy Sencho, it's ready. One of Buggy crew yelled out. Excellent. You will learn to fear the name Buggy. Flashily blow these bastards away, he ordered. Oh, looks like they're finally done, Sencho. Kuina commented blandly. Huh, finally. I thought I was going to die of boredom, Luffy replied. Bang. Any reply from Kuina was cut off by the shot of a cannon right in their direction. Neither looked too worried though. Luffy stepped forward and lazily lifted an open palm towards the oncoming projectile. He dug his heels in into the shock of the Buggy pirates. He caught their infamous buggy ball like a tennis ball. Using the momentum, he allowed his hand to be wound back. I believe this belongs to you, he stated before launching the cannonball right back at the pirates. They all panicked like headless chickens, screaming for their lives. They didn't have that much time though, as the buggy ball reached them and exploded with concussive force. The entire deck of the restaurant was in shambles. Luffy and Kuina patiently waited for the smoke to clear, hoping that they didn't do too much damage as they were both itching for a fight. Crazy battle maniacs. As the dust settled, it was revealed that almost the entire crew was taken out, which wasn't surprising as they were basically grunts. The only ones left standing were Buggy himself, who used 2 random crew members as a meat shield. His first mate Moji, who survived thanks to his pet lion, Richie, shielding him from the blast, as well as his chief of staff Kabaji, who did the same as his captain. Captain, Kabaji called out. Oh, Kabaji, I can't suppress my anger any longer, Buggy replied to the unasked question. Aurora, it looks like they're about to go into a cliché villain monologue. We don't really have time for any of that. I'll take Big Nose. You handle the furry one and the flaming fruit with the unicycle. Neither are a match for your skills, so clean them up good, Luffy ordered, getting a chuckle out of Kuina before she gave an affirmative and took off in the direction of Kabaji and Moji, trusting her captain's evaluation of the situation. She came to a stop in front of the 2 senior members of the Buggy Pirates and slowly unsheathed her sword, making it clear that she was here to take them out. The flamboyant one on the unicycle, Kabaji, was about to open his mouth for what was probably some pre-fight trash talking, but Kuina wasn't in the mood to entertain these clowns. She sped forward, her sword gleaming in the sunlight, flashed forward with frightening speed towards Kabaji. It was only through luck that he managed to jump backwards, but it wasn't enough to spare him an injury as a shallow cut opened up on his torso. Seeing his crewmate in danger, Moji moved to intercept Kuina only to get a face full of her boot, the high heel digging painfully into his cheek, drawing blood. Kuina pulled her leg back before sliding forward and lodging her elbow in his throat, cutting off his oxygen, causing him to clutch his neck for breath. She spotted Kabaji moving towards her again, so she put one foot forward and used it as a fulcrum to deliver a roundhouse kick towards him, which he dodged once again by skipping back, but was caught by Kuina, who used the momentum of her spin to bring her sword forward and deliver a vicious cut across his chest. Kabaji cried out in pain at the damage that was done to him. Kuina didn't dwell on him too long though, knowing that she needed to take out at least one of them fast before focusing all her attention on the other. Seeing Moji still struggling for breath, she decided he would go first, as without that giant lion he was completely useless. As he was kneeling on the ground, gasping for breath, she delivered an axe kick to the back of his head, causing it to bounce off the ground. She wasn't done though, as she skillfully slashed the back of his knees, severing the tendons, making sure that if he did regain consciousness, he wouldn't be walking anytime soon. She sensed an attack from her left flank and back flipped away just in time to see a fireball pass through the space she was occupying. She raised an eyebrow in interest after seeing the fireball. Maybe this insect wasn't as useless as she assumed. Kabaji drew his saber and charged as Kuina, still riding his unicycle, making her sweat drop at the silliness of it all. His mobility was greatly diminished by being in that unicycle, yet he still didn't get off it. She mentally shrugged before engaging him in a sword battle. His attacks were quite easy to anticipate to her experienced eyes, and he didn't have much room to maneuver in. She blocked and parried all of his strikes with relative ease, making him quite upset. He disengaged her before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a few spinning tops. Acrobatic special, 100 spin tops wind attack. He announced his attack before launching a multitude of tops in her direction, which only served to irritate her further with his ridiculous antics instead of fighting seriously. She danced through the barrage, her sword flashing every now and then. When the attack was done, every top throw in her direction was lying on the floor, split directly in half. She didn't afford him the time to comprehend what just happened as she took off in a full sprint in his direction. Her eyes sharpened and her body tensed. She closed the gap between in a matter of seconds before her sword up, perpendicular to the ground. "Eteru, Daishinken," Kuina called out before bringing her sword down and gliding past him to land in a crouch. Kabaji didn't feel anything for a moment and was about to turn to press an attack, before his entire front side erupted in a geyser of blood. He let out a cry of pain before passing out face first in a puddle of his own blood. Kuina regally got to her feet before flicking the excess blood off her sword and sheathing it at her side, making sure her sword was secured by the sash around her waist. "Kaba-chan." Buggy cry rang out as he saw his chief of staff taken down so easily. "Earlier on, you have some nerve coming here and interrupting my party, boy. Who the hell are you?" Buggy demanded. "Normally I wouldn't bother telling my name to someone as insignificant as you, but I'm in a giving mood today. My name is Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will be Pirate King," he announced, simply oozing confidence. Buggy looked at him in disbelief before he burst out laughing. Luffy did nothing to stop him, just looking at him with an amused smile on his face, like one would wear when watching their favorite animal in the zoo or, in this case, favorite clown in the circus. "That was funny, kid. For making me laugh so hard I might just give you a painless death," Buggy said to him in a patronizing manner. "But still, you're a pirate, huh? What business do you have with me?" "Well, you see, you have this very nice 15 million bully bounty on your head, and I decided that it would go a long way to filling the coffers of my budding pirate crew. Plus, it was an excellent chance to get some combat experience for myself and my first mate over there. So you see, you are quite the useful clown. I must thank you for that," Luffy replied with a pleasant smile on his face. Buggy became even more infuriated at his response, for treating him as a training exercise with a cash prize at the end. It was humiliating to listen to this upstart speak to him in such a way. I will flashily kill you today, boy," Buggy roared before flinging his throwing knives in Luffy's direction. Luffy sprinted forward and performed a combat roll, allowing the knives to pass overhead, before getting up with his momentum and kicking the air in front of Buggy. Rankyaku. The air blade traveled sped to Buggy at frightening pace, and he was too slow to dodge as it split him in half, cleanly down the middle. Luffy was about to relax, disappointed at the one-sided fight, before he noticed that Buggy's signature didn't disappear, as it normally would upon death. He tensed his body in preparation, which was the right thing to do as he sensed an attack from behind and spun away just in time to see a floating hand holding a knife sail through the space he was just occupying. If he was even a second late, he would have been knifed in the back. He wasn't too worried though and simply raised an eyebrow at the strange phenomenon. Seemed like you got lucky there, boy. You see, I ate the bara no mai, making me a splitting man. Bladed attacks are useless against me," he gloated, causing Luffy to stare at him with a deadpan expression. "So bladed attacks won't work on you. That means I have to use some good old-fashioned blunt force to break you," Luffy commented. "Haha, that's right." Buggy laughed before his mind caught up to what Luffy said. Was as far as he got. "Sorry." Luffy vanished before smashing his knuckles into Buggy's face with a backhanded punch, causing him to stumble and cry out in pain. But Luffy didn't give him the chance to regroup as he stomped down on his foot, causing Buggy to stand up on his toes in an attempt to alleviate the pain, which did nothing but earn him a brutal headbutt to his big red nose. Luffy finished off the combo with a thrust kick to Buggy's sternum, sending him flying into one of the buildings behind him. Buggy was down for about a minute before the rubble started to move and he emerged. He was bleeding slightly from the mouth, looking like he was about to pop an artery. I will kill you, slowly and painfully. The level of your disrespect to the great Buggy-sama is unforgivable," Buggy shouted hysterically before gripping a knife between each of the spaces between his fingers on his right hand. Bara cannon. The hand launched at Luffy, the 4 knives glinting at the prospect of drawing fresh blood. It was a good attack, but it was far too slow for a guy like Luffy to be hit with it. After waiting for the hand to get to the perfect position, Luffy used his inhuman dexterity to leap over the attack, high into the air before using his momentum to bring him back down, allowing him to bring his foot down on the disembodied hand hard, the velocity of the fall aiding him greatly. Buggy screamed in agony as the fingers on his head were undoubtedly broken. He reattached his hand to his arm, gently cradling his limp fingers, barely stopping the tears that were threatening to escape at the pain he was feeling. Unfortunately for him, Luffy wasn't done. He sent a stiff kick aimed at Buggy's kneecaps. The clown captain's self-preservation being instincts on high alert, used his ability to avoid the attack. Bara emergency escape. His body disassembled into numerous parts, allowing him to evade the crippling blow. It was unfortunate once again that this only presented Luffy with more targets to aim for. Using his superior speed as well as generous application of Soru, Luffy managed to target many of the disembodied body parts and stomped on them hard. His feet, reaming hand, shoulders, thighs as well as his groin. The end result was Buggy, after finally realizing the danger he was in far too late, pulling himself together and lying on the floor in the fetal position, sobbing to himself at the torment he was being forced to endure. He wasn't sure if he would be able to move anytime soon. He attempted to look up and glare murderously at Luffy, but the tears falling from his eyes ruined the effect. Luffy just quirked an eyebrow at him in amusement before pointing his thumb in a certain direction. Buggy looked to where he was pointing to see his chief of staff erupting in a geyser of blood. Kaba-chan. He managed to scream out, completely horrified at what he was seeing. He wasn't even allowed to comprehend the events properly as a shadow loomed over him. He looked up and stared into to him at least, demonic eyes of the bastard who put him in this position. The next time you wake, you'll probably be in a comfortable prison. Just know that your defeat wasn't in vain and that your bounty will contribute greatly to my ambitions. Bye-bye, Luffy said condescendingly. Buggy wanted to scream out in anger, but he didn't get the chance as Luffy put his hand on head and Buggy felt a static shock race through his body, shutting down his nervous system. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was a set of gleaming purple eyes. As Luffy watched Buggy pass out from the electric shock administered to his system, he slapped his old Kairoski bracelet on his hand, ensuring that in the event that he did wake, he wouldn't have the power to escape. He looked behind him when he heard the click-clack of high heels approaching him. Good job, Kuina. I hope those guys at least provided a decent warm for you. He questioned with a cheeky smirk. Kuina just rolled her eyes good-naturedly with a small smile on her face. Not really. It was kind of embarrassing how weak they were. How about the captain? Was he any good? She inquired. No, really. He had almost no skill whatsoever. The only thing he had going for him was his devil fruit abilities. Turns out he ate the Bara no Mai, allowing him to split any part of his body. He is the natural enemy of sword users. At least, he likes to think so. I wouldn't put any stock into it though, as I'm sure you would have found a way to beat him. He answered with an encouraging smile in her direction. Knowing that his first mate sometimes had self-confidence issues when it came to her skills due to people mocking her for years because of her gender. His words had the desired effect as Kuina stood up straighter. And there was a happy glow in her eyes at the praise directed towards her. Those are real. Whenever I've heard about them, they were spoken about as though they were myths. She pondered. They are very real. In the East Blue, they are thought of as myths because of their rarity. But on the Grand Line, we will be tripping over devil fruit users as everyone and their dogs, literally in some cases, have one. Luffy answered, getting an affirming nod in reply. In fact, I ate a devil fruit too when I was younger, he said. Kuina raised an eyebrow in interest, having never seen him use a special ability. Really? Yep. I ate the Goro no Mai, making me a lightning man. It's what I used to knock this guy out. I sent a pulse of electricity through this guy's brain. Not enough to kill him, but enough to shut down his nervous system and render him unconscious, he answered, causing Kuina to hum in appreciation, clearly impressed at the range of her captain's abilities. I then slapped this old bracelet of mine on his wrist. It is made out of a metal called Kairoski, which emits the energy of the sea and therefore renders devil fruit users unable to use their abilities, making sure this guy won't try any funny business if he does manage to regain consciousness. He further explained, anyway, we got what he came here for. Like, get some rope on this guy and get him to the nearest marine base. There's one not too far away from here if I remember correctly. But before that, it would be impolite not to raid this guy's treasure store for whatever we want after we went to all the trouble of beating the stuffing out of his crew. It's not like he's going to need it where he's going, he suggested, getting an affirmative from his first mate. Hi, Sencho, she replied before following behind her captain with a spring in her step, happy from having a fight today, even if it wasn't necessarily a good one. In a building not too far away, Nami watched in shock at the way the two strangers dispatched an entire pirate crew with laughable ease. She was thinking of stealing Buggy's treasure while they kept him busy but couldn't find an opening, and the fights didn't even last that long. She was now glad she didn't do that. Those two were dangerous. She didn't want to be in their crosshairs if she could help it. She was upset though as they took not only Buggy's treasure, but Buggy himself as well, who would earn them a cool 15 million billy. She lamented the poor circumstances of their meeting. They would have been useful in her endeavors. Oh well, nothing to do about it now. It only took 2 hours of sailing to get to the next island, Omega Town. Thanks to the goods they appropriated from Buggy's crew, they had an impressive cash reserve already. His bounty and those after him will only add to the total. Luffy also helped himself to one of the boats from Buggy's ship to replace their dinghy. This one was quite a bit larger, but not too large to be inoperable by the two of them. It had a small cabin and could easily fit 6-7 people. It would be enough for their journey throughout East Blue, but they would definitely need a sturdier ship before reaching the Grand Line. Luffy and Kuina happily walked out of the marine base with a bag containing their 15 million billy. They received incredulous looks when turning in Buggy's bounty, but Kuina's reputation as well as Luffy's intimidating presence stayed any suspicions the Marines might have. Not that Luffy or Kuina cared. They were now casually walking around town, stopping every so often to purchase provisions or inspect something that caught their eye. Omega Town was a small town located in an island that was made up mainly of forests and wildlife. The locals were relatively friendly and open to answering questions about the town as well as surrounding islands. All in all, it was a pleasant experience for Luffy and Kuina, who took the time to kick back and relax a little. After spending an enjoyable day together, which only served to deepen the trust and familiarity with each other, Luffy and Kuina casually strolled towards their boat, enjoying the view of the setting sun on the horizon. There was a comfortable silence between them as they walked. There was no need to disrupt the atmosphere until Luffy came to an abrupt halt in the middle of the road. Kuina looked to her captain, sensing his unease. "Sencho, what's wrong?" she inquired. Luffy didn't answer her for a while, which she didn't mind. She was a patient woman after all. He looked to be staring in a random direction, concentrating heavily on whatever he was thinking about. After about a minute, his eyes snapped in her direction. "Something's wrong here," he said. Kuina, in the short time they were together, never doubted the words of Luffy, and she wouldn't start now. "I can feel an overwhelmingly disgusting cluster of people in the direction of those forests. It is quite deep in, far away from civilization. If I had to guess, it is some kind of underground base." Kuina's eyebrows reached her hairline at the information. "How do you know that?" she asked. "You remember the abilities I told you about? The one I said I would explain when we got a larger crew. This is one of them. I faintly sense the presence of some of the people on this island. I'm not as good with this skill as I like, but it is sufficient enough to detect presences. Like I said, there is an overwhelming amount of negativity coming from that place I mentioned. It almost makes me vomit. Whatever it isn't good," he explained. Kuina became serious at hearing this. She didn't like the implications of what she was hearing. "What will we do, Sencho?" she asked. "I've said before that I'm no hero, and I stick by that. But leaving things as is would leave a bad taste in my mouth. These people, whoever they are, feel far too vile for me to ignore. Not to mention, I can almost feel something or someone calling out to me, something resonating with me. I don't know if it's because of my ability or if I'm imagining things, but I need to know what it is," he replied before looking directly into Kuina's eyes. "I know you agreed to join me, and I'm happier than you can imagine. But I don't want to drag you along in this crazy endeavor of mine. I don't know what or who we might encounter. I don't know if I will even make it out alive. If you want to stay behind, I won't fault you." Kuina just looked at him with a warm smile on her face. "I agreed to follow you, and I will stick by that decision. I'm a big girl, you know. I didn't regret my choice then, and I don't regret it now. I will follow you to the ends of the earth, Sencho. Besides, I would be embarrassed if my captain, the future Pirate King, couldn't at least handle something on this tiny island," she said without a shred of doubt in her voice before finishing off with a playful verbal jab in his direction. Luffy laughed happily at her words, glad he found such an amazing woman to be in his crew. She truly was a gem in the sea of trash here in East Blue. They shared a quiet moment together before sobering up quickly. They nodded to each other seriously before Luffy took off in the direction of the forest, Kuina hot on his heels. After about 40 minutes of travel, Luffy eventually came to a stop on the edge of a wide-open clearing. After scoping out the area, he turned to Kuina with a serious expression on his face. "We have no idea what awaits us in there, so I want you to remain on high alert. I trust you implicitly to watch my back, just as I hope you will trust me to watch yours. Hold nothing back and try to stay as close as possible," Luffy advised, nodding a strong nod of confirmation. They both went along, searching for some kind of entrance. After 10 minutes, they hit pay dirt. Luffy almost tripped over something on the ground, which turned out to be a handle of some kind. After unlatching it and opening it up, it led to a bunker. The feeling of wrongness only amplified as they entered the bunker, closing the hatch behind them. The entire place was white. From the walls to the ceilings, it was all white. It was almost like some kind of hospital, right down to the smell of the disinfectant in the air. The place was unnatural. What was something like this doing in the middle of a forest? "I don't like this," Luffy said. Kuina agreed with him wholeheartedly. Something about this place made her skin crawl. After making sure they were ready, they both moved forward cautiously. They walked around aimlessly for a good chunk of time, taking care to be as silent as possible. Just when they were about to give up and declare the place abandoned, they heard voices. Sample 47 surpassed all expectations. It's incomprehensible that it was actually a success. It was cleared as completely fit and healthy as far as physical fitness is concerned. They heard the voice of an older man speak. From the snippets of the conversation that they picked up, they concluded that this was some sort of research facility. Luffy turned to Kuina and held up 5 fingers, then a single finger, signaling that there are 6 people in the room. She nodded positively and prepared to find a way in before Luffy's eyes widened slightly. He immediately grabbed her around the waist and took a great leap backwards just in time as the wall in front of them exploded outward. Oh my, it looks like Sample 47 found a pair of rats snooping around our base. The voice from before spoke out. They looked forward to the room and saw a silhouette. As the dust cleared, they got a good look at the person responsible for the exploding wall. It was a woman. A tall woman, probably about 6 feet tall. She was wearing all black, with black combat boots, black cargo pants that showed off the curvy contours of her hips. On her torso she wore form-fitting long-sleeved black top that hugged her large breasts, as well as black leather gloves on her hands. She had shoulder-length hair cut in a Heim style that was a beautiful shade of red. Her face was one that wouldn't look out of place on a supermodel with her regal features and unblemished skin. The thing that drew Luffy the most, though, were her eyes. They were a beautiful stormy gray, covered by square-rimmed black spectacles that didn't at all detract from the mesmerizing quality of her eyes. The unnerving thing about her, though, was that her face was completely devoid of emotion. Her eyes were blank, and her gaze was empty. Luffy wasn't a soft-hearted person by nature, but his heart clenched painfully at the sight of this woman. That was when he caught sight of the large metal collar around her neck. For some reason, it made his blood boil in anger. Well, look what we have here. The two of you don't look familiar. I assumed some big-shot pirates were raiding us, but it turns out it was just 2 nobodies. The man from before spoke condescendingly. He was an average-looking man with a heavy receding hairline and a white lab coat over medical scrubs. There were 4 other people who were wearing the same clothes, signifying their positions as doctors, scientists. The one who spoke, though, had a sick smile on his face as he spoke to them, like they were mice caught in his trap. "Who are you with?" "The Revolutionary Army," he asked in a sing-song time of voice that pissed Luffy off big time. However, he didn't even bother to look at the doctor. From the moment he laid eyes on her, he hasn't looked away from the woman who also stared blankly at him. "Who am I kidding? Of course you are. Only those cretins would have the resources to find and infiltrate a secret government research facility like this one. I must commend you for your work. However, this is where your journey ends. Sample 47 here is about to snuff the life right out of you," he said with faux pity as he pointed to the woman, who he addressed as Sample 47. This is why Luffy loved letting assholes like this run their mouths. He just gave away most of the information Luffy was seeking in his cliché monologue. It filled Luffy with distaste at the thought of what kind of atrocities the world government sanctioned these sorry excuses for doctors to perform. "Kill them," he ordered the woman. "Kuina, stay back and make sure the others don't interfere. This is my fight," Luffy ordered with utmost seriousness in his voice, never taking his eyes of the woman before him. Kuina noticed her captain's changed demeanor and obeyed his order, walking off to the side and keeping a sharp eye on the doctors. The stare-off between the two lasted for a few seconds, with Luffy searching for something in her eyes and Sample 47 just staring blankly at him. The stalemate was broken when she took an inhuman leap that crossed the entire length of the large hallway and was on him in seconds, extending her fist for a straight punch. Luffy's reflexes were quick enough to anticipate the move and take an equally impressive leap backwards, which turned out to be a smart thing as the ground her fist made contact with was demolished, leaving a substantial crater. Luffy was flabbergasted at the monstrous strength of the woman. That wasn't normal at all. Kuina was equally bug-eyed at the scene she was witnessing. The doctor, on the other hand, just laughed loudly, his laugh sounding like nails raking across a chalkboard. "Well, what do you think, boy? Sample 47's strength is quite impressive, no?" The doctor taunted Luffy, not giving him time to recover. The woman pressed her attack with another punch aimed at Luffy's torso at high velocity. Luffy once again thanked his superior speed and reflexes for allowing him to dodge the head. He noticed that while the woman had truly monstrous strength, her speed wasn't close to matching his yet. Then again, thanks to his naturally superior frame, which was built for speed and power, coupled with his Akuma no Mi ability, which boosted his already outrageous body to superhuman levels in terms of speed, reflexes, and dexterity, there were very few people in the world who were faster than him. So while she had him beat in the strength department, it was useless if she couldn't land a hit on him. From the stiff way she moved her body, he could tell that she was either not well trained or she was holding back for some reason. He honestly couldn't get a good read on this woman. She was a walking set of contradictions. She's the crowning jewel of this facility, the 47th human sample that we experimented on. The other 46 were failures and had to be disposed of. It was like a sign from the gods above, validating our work when she was receptive to our tests. We injected her with multitude of different chemicals, some good, some potentially fatal, but she soldiered on with a will to live that defied common sense. She somehow survived. No, she didn't just survive. She was somehow able to assimilate the chemicals into her bloodstream, mutating her body into something that transcends common sense. Her strength, as you have noticed, is superior to a regular human's by a miles. Her body is far sturdier, able to tank hits that normal people might die from. She heals at a pace that is slightly faster than normal. Her brain works at a higher level as well, sending and receiving signals at a faster rate. The side effect, though, was that she lost the ability to feel emotions like a normal human being. The doctor clarified with a sick smirk on her face. Kuina looked horrified at the implications, and Luffy narrowed his eyes in fury. He didn't like what he was hearing at all. They stripped this woman of not only her emotions, but her freedom and her dignity. There was nothing more that Luffy despised. The woman's eyes never gave anything away, though. Her empty gaze all the more rage-inducing. Luffy would know, because he hasn't broken eye contact with her from the start of the confrontation. He saw a lot of himself in this woman. He couldn't help but wonder if his grandpa didn't take him under his wing and afford him protection. Would he end up like this, being dissected at some government facility? This could so easily have been him. That's why Luffy wouldn't pity her. She was far too strong, not just physically, but mentally as well, for her to be pitied. She is a survivor. She endured the horrors that were inflicted upon her and persevered through it all. She deserved nothing but his respect and admiration. Luffy decided to stop being so passive in the fight. He would give this woman a fight worthy of someone of her stature. He would bring out something in her, one way or another. Even the barest spark of emotion will be a victory for him. He made the conscious effort to not turn on his Loja defenses for 2 reasons. Number 1, he didn't want to give away his ability this soon, as this was a clearly government-sanctioned facility. Probably off the books, he didn't want to take any chances with whatever surveillance they might have. And number 2, he wanted to fight this woman in a pure physical fight. She was powerful, no doubt about that, and the warrior spirit in Luffy wanted to go toe-to-toe with her. He wanted to bring out the fighting spirit within her. He knows it's there. Her survival of the horrors she endured is evidence enough. He would make her feel something. After sending a challenging smirk in her direction, Luffy didn't dodge the next hit. He flowed around it before lodging his fist in the woman's surprisingly toned midsection. She staggered for a bit, as Luffy put a bit more force into that hit, which was a good thing because it felt as though he hit a brick wall. She quickly gathered herself though and sent a spin kick at him, causing him to duck under it before throwing his left leg at her in a wide arc, attempting to sweep her off her feet. She anticipated his move and jumped over the sweep, before bringing her heel down for an axe kick that Luffy blocked by crossing his forearms over his face. It wasn't enough, however, as although he blocked the kick, the force behind it sent him skidding back. He had to shake his arms vigorously to get some feeling back in them as the hit she landed on him made them numb. It hurt. Luffy's smirk widened. It hurt a hell of a lot. Impressive, isn't she? Once we figure out how to stimulate the same results in others, we will be able to mass-produce people like her. The world government will have an entire army of super soldiers. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to communicate our success as of yet due to the remoteness of the facility. But in the next month, our handler will be here and we can take our work to the higher levels, getting a wider variety of samples to work with. And Sample 47 here will willing subdue and help experiment on them. Thanks to that collar around her neck, she knows that one wrong move and that pretty little head of hers will be blown clean off her shoulders at the push of a button. The doctor elucidated as he waved around a remote in his hand. Luffy's blood boiled even more. That explains why she didn't just break out, as she was clearly superior to these worthless trash. She was basically a slave to them. But she won't try anything because to rebel would require to have emotions, which, unfortunately, she doesn't possess. He finished with a false tone of pity. It happened within a fraction of a second, but Luffy spotted it immediately. He was just as inhuman as she was, so it was hard to hide things like that from him. He saw for that split second that her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly in anger, before it vanished like it was never there. Luffy's grin widened at the implications. Not wasting any more time, he blurred to her position and sent a haymaker at her. She put up her arms in defense before grabbing his trailing arm and executing a judo throw, sending him flying overhead. Luffy managed to right himself in midair and used the ceiling as a foothold to propel himself back to the ground at a higher velocity, sending a dropkick at her. She jumped back, causing his foot to strike the ground and tear up a good chunk of it. He had to improvise and perform a backwards combat roll to dodge the vicious sweep kick aimed at his head. He used the momentum from the roll to kip up to his feet before blurring forward, left fist outstretched. She met him head-on with her right, and there was a shockwave that emanated when their fists connected with each other. Luffy knew he wasn't imagining it when he felt her fist against his. The more the fight went on, the more fluidly she was moving. The more purpose were behind her hits. They say when two warriors cross swords, or in this case fists, they can get a feel of their opponent in terms of their personality and character. Luffy knew, from his instincts and excellent judgment, that there was more to this woman than what that idiot doctor assumed of her. He could see from her eyes. There was something in there now. It was almost indescribable, but Luffy could see it. There was some enjoyment in them. She was feeling something from this. He could relate, because his blood was boiling in excitement as well. It was rare that he could cut loose against someone, the only other person being Kuina. He made up his mind in that moment. He would free this woman and offer her a place on his crew. She had far too much to offer to the world to be stuck in this place like some lab rat. He met her eyes once again, his softening slightly, and he smiled understandingly at her, making her eyes widen a little before returning to its normal blank look. But his message was received. He wanted to feel more of what she could do. He wanted her to put her soul into this fight. No more words needed to be said as they clashed once again. They met head-on, slugging each other, neither holding back. Punches, kicks, headbutts, elbows, throws, all of these were dished out in their deadly dance. Blood was spilt from both sides as they dished out punishment without reserve. Luffy could tell that for all the doctor saying that she didn't feel anything, this woman had emotions. You just had to look further beneath the surface to comprehend them. Like now, for instance, Luffy could tell that she was reveling in the freedom of the battle they were having. The freedom to fight without restraint. The freedom to express herself through her fists and feet. She was enjoying herself just as much as he was. Her eyes were starting to reflect her state of mind as they were becoming clearer the more the fight went on. Kuina just shook her head with an amused smile on her face, long since realizing what was happening. Her captain truly was a remarkable individual, to be able to elicit such a reaction from someone who was supposed to have the emotional range of a robot. The doctors sensed the shift in the atmosphere as well as they were looking more and more agitated as time went by. Sample 47. Stop playing around and kill these intruders, or it will be your head in the platter. He roared in anger and a little worry. Luffy knew he couldn't drag this out any longer than needed. He had to use the full force of his power to take her down. While he felt bad about it, he was holding back quite a bit of it. As they met once again in a test of strength, Luffy exerted more power, causing her arm to buckle under the pressure. He capitalized on the opportunity and delivered a flurry of punches on her sternum, midsection, shoulder, lower back, and right jaw. She was left staggering at the combo before Luffy delivered a straight thrust kick at her face, sending her flying into the wall behind her, slumping down slightly as she landed. He didn't feel bad about being that brutal in his attacks as he knew she could take it, and anything less would be an insult to a warrior as extraordinary as she is. Get up, you stupid bitch. Kill them now. I won't let you fall this easily. We made you. Get up and defend your owners. The doctor screamed, foaming slightly at the mouth in anger and fear, his cocky demeanor from before vanishing as he witnessed the extent at which Luffy outmatched his experiment. Luffy just shook his head at the worthless scum that these doctors were. There was no need for them among the world of the living any longer. Allowing his body to return to its natural state, lightning flowing through him, Luffy vanished in a blue spark before reappearing in the exact same spot. The doctors didn't notice a damn thing. All Kuina saw was the flash of blue. It was almost impossible to track Luffy's movement. The doctors realized something had happened, but didn't know what until they saw Luffy's left hand. The looks of horror and terror dawning on their faces was like a shot of adrenaline to him. These animals were a stain on humanity. He was sorely tempted to erase them from existence, but he knew he had no right. He looked to the direction of the far wall and spotted his opponent walking out of the dust that kicked up upon her crash. She was walking a little gingerly from the punishment her body took, but she looked fine for the most part. She spotted the remote in Luffy's hand immediately as he waved it at her. She tensed up for a second before it disappeared. Luffy looked directly into her eyes. It was intense and filled with significance. It was like he was piercing her soul with his purple eyes. It was like she was being stripped bare and her entire being put on display before this man. She wouldn't admit it, but a pleasant thrill made its way up her spine. This man made her experience things that she didn't think possible anymore. He managed to elicit feeling that she longed though she lost. He made her want to be better. His very presence was so enormous and commanding, it was calling out to her. After about a minute of intense staring, Luffy spoke. Since I have this remote, that means I can give you an order, right? He questioned, but didn't wait for a response as he pressed on. If you would, please dispose of these worthless insects that are polluting the very air with their presence. He finished, pointing at the horrified doctors. The sadistic gleam that came to her eyes was visible to everyone there. There was no mistaking it. The doctors realized their mistake far too late. They had created a monster, and it was about to be directed at them. For the next few minutes, nothing could be heard but the agonizing screams of the doctors as well as the snapping of bones and the rending of human flesh. Luffy never once took his eyes off the horrific sight, and neither did Kuina, both having been desensitized to this level of violence a long time ago. They both just looked on dispassionately. After a few more minutes of screams, there was absolute silence before the sound of footsteps sounded out. The woman came into view, covered head to toe in blood and gore from the brutal execution she just performed. She came to a stop in front of Luffy, looking into his eyes with her blank but seemingly satisfied eyes, before dropping to one knee. "The order has been fulfilled, Master." She spoke for the first time, her voice completely monotone, but still had a beautiful, velvety quality to it. Luffy just gazed at her with a gobsmacked expression. Whoa. First of all, Luffy crushed the remote in his hands before leaning down and using his ability to override and circuits in the explosive mechanism in the collar before exerting his raw power and tearing it off her neck. She looked up at him uncomprehendingly. He just smiled softly down at her before offering his hand. I'm not your master. I'd much rather be your friend, he said, causing her eyes to widen slightly in shock. My name is Monkey D. Luffy. The pretty lady to my right is Kimishima Kuina. Can you tell us your name? He asked gently after introducing himself and Kuina. The woman looked up at him in wonder before answering. Sample 47, she said softly in her monotonous voice. Luffy frowned at her answer. That isn't your real name. It's something those fucking asshole doctors came up with. Please don't ever address yourself as that ever again. It dehumanizes you and I don't like it. You are a normal person ... Well, normal isn't really accurate, but don't feel bad about that. I'm not normal either. Same can be said about Kuina. Normal is for boring people. Do you mind if I give you a name, seeing as though you can't remember yours? Luffy said before earnestly questioning her. She gazed at him in awe. Well, it might be, as it was hard to tell with that blank look in her eyes. But if you looked closely, you could see a little eagerness in her eyes. She nodded in response. Luffy smiled slightly before putting his hand to his chin before taking up a comical thinking pose, causing Kuina to chuckle at his goofiness, and even their new friend felt her lips twitch slightly at the sight. They didn't have to wait long at Luffy snapped his fingers in an aha motion before addressing the object of his interest. He gazed into her eyes and spoke her new name. Shizuku. Saitama Shizuku. That will be your new name. Do you like it? The now named Shizuku closed her eyes for a moment, seemingly digesting the name, repeating it constantly in her mind. Shizuku. She said it out loud, before repeating it again and again and again. I am Shizuku, she finished. A gleam of what could be construed as happiness and contentment passed through her eyes. Shishishi, I'm glad you like it, Shizuku. Luffy laughed in happiness. Hi, thank you, master, Shizuku replied, causing Luffy to face vault. Oi, Shizuku, I told you, I'm not your master, I'm your friend, so you can just call me Luffy, he advised. Yes, master, she replied blankly. Luffy's face was frozen in a forced smile as his eyebrow started to twitch erratically in sheer annoyance. He took a deep breath before calming down and pinning Shizuku with a serious stare. I won't offer you any false platitudes, as I can't begin to imagine the kind of horrors you were forced to endure. I won't tell you what you have to do. You are free now. You can leave and we will probably never see each other again. You don't have to worry about us saying anything about you or your situation to anybody. However, as your new friend, I want to make you an offer. I have a dream, you see. I want to sail the greatest sea the world has to offer. I will take on the Grand Line and I will find One Piece. I will be the Pirate King, because the Pirate King is the man with the most freedom on the seas. I can tell you're like me in some regard. After being subjugated in this lab for God knows how long, you yearn for the freedom to do whatever you want. I can guarantee you that we will travel the seas, finding more nakama and having fun adventures. Come with me, Shizuku, and I will show you the world, Luffy declared passionately, never straying from Shizuku's eyes. She looked up at him, judging the sincerity of his words. It only took a few seconds, but for the first time since he laid eyes on her, he saw a real emotion on her face. A small smile bloomed on her lips as she reached out and took his hand. Luffy broke out into an ecstatic grin at her response. Yes, a new nakama, he cheered, doing a little jig in response to his happiness, causing both his crew members to stare at him, one in amusement, the other in just a little happiness. That means you'll join, right, Shizuku? Luffy stopped his dance to ask, just for verbal confirmation. Yes, master, Shizuku replied blankly. Luffy stopped his dance completely before looking at her in irritation before letting out an incomprehensible shout. Ag, he screamed, pulling at his hair in frustration at his new crew member seemingly unable to understand that he didn't want her to call him that. Kuina just looked on in amusement, before looking at Shizuku. She couldn't mistake the glint of mischievousness that she saw in those normally blank eyes as she stared at their captain. Kuina just chuckled at the way her captain was so easily riled up by her. It certainly was going to be an interesting time ahead. After successfully recruiting the emotionless girl with the strength to punch mountains out of existence, Luffy decided that the research facility was far too dangerous to leave as it. He didn't know what kind of data was left lying around by those sick bastards and didn't want to take the chance of the stooges in the world government getting their filthy paws on it. With that in mind, he took the difficult decision to burn the place to the ground. Okay, that was a lie. He was almost salivating at the prospect of setting something on fire. As a healthy 17-year-old, one couldn't fault him for his mild case of pyromania. No, what was most troubling was the creepy laugh coupled with the excited glint in his eyes as he watched the facility burn to the ground. Kuina had to stop from face-palming at her captain's quirky habits. Shizuku didn't really find anything wrong with it. Then again, she had an equally sadistic gleam in her eyes as she watched her old prison burn. It may have been her imagination, but Kuina could have sworn that she saw the emotionless girl shudder in pleasure at witnessing the scene. It was tough on Kuina, being the sanest one on her crew, which was kind of sad as she was a battle maniac who loved to spill the blood of her enemies. They were a real fucked up bunch. Well, I would say this was a highly productive day. Not only getting a cool 15 million bully for that clown Buggy, but also recruiting a new crew member while taking down a world government facility. All in all, a good day's work. Luffy spoke out as the three of them walked to the boat. Luffy had an extra bounce in his step from the good mood that he was currently in. Maybe it was good for you, Sencho, but I was basically a spectator. I didn't even get to fight, Kuina said a little petulantly, like a little girl who got her favorite doll taken away. They're there. You can take down the next bounty we come across. I promise. Luffy consoled her as he gently stroked her hair, something that she quite enjoyed, though she would never say that out loud. Kuina perked up quickly after that. The petting from her captain plus the prospect of a good fight put her in an equally good mood. Shizuku just watched on with a blank look on her face. If you looked closely though, you could see her eyebrow twitching a little in what was presumably annoyance. So where to next, Sencho? Kuina inquired. Well, to be honest with you, I have no clue. Luffy answered sheepishly as her rubbed the back of his head, causing Kuina to nearly face vault. For all his strength and badassery, her captain could be such a goofball sometimes. I didn't have a set course in mind. I was just planning on going from island to island, looking for potential recruits. I know the basic layout of East Blue, and I can handle basic navigation, but it's not something I would bet my money on. I would suggest that we just head out to sea and anchor on the next island we come across, he suggested nonchalantly. Kuina didn't really have a problem with that as it was basically what she was doing thus far. Their salvation came from an unexpected source. The next island is Gecko Island, north-northeast, 2 days travel time if bearings are kept true. Shizuku provided in her usual robotic manner, causing Luffy and Kuina to come to a screeching halt, both giving her incredulous looks, trying to comprehend what they were hearing. Shizuku ... You know how to navigate. Like full more than just basics. Full on deep sea, treacherous storms, crazy oceans navigation? Luffy asked slowly, trying to fully digest the information. Shizuku just looked at her captain blankly, before giving an affirmative nod. Luffy, having gotten somewhat used to his new companion's stunted social skills, quickly understood the implication. He broke out into an excited grin before giving an excited whoop, in celebration of finally having a competent navigator. He quickly scooped up the large frame of Shizuku and spun her around in happiness. Shizuku tensed up briefly before relaxing her body. Although they were basically strangers, her instincts were telling her that her new captain would never harm her. He could have killed her already in their fight, but he didn't for some reason. Maybe he wanted to use her for her strength, but it wouldn't make any sense as he was stronger than her. Maybe she was just reading too much into it. It was an unfortunate habit of hers, one developed from years of slavery and torture. She always expected the worst in people. That way when they did betray her, she wouldn't be as hurt by it. She wanted to apply that to her new companions, but it was difficult. Her captain was a mysterious man. He was powerful, that much was obvious, but he was also highly charismatic. He was very open with his emotions, displaying them for all to see. But there was always this glint in his eyes, and this feeling that all is not what it seems. He was a puzzle. The good thing, though, was that Shizuku loved puzzles, but it was a moot point to think about. For the first time in her life, Shizuku decided that she would trust her heart to guide her instead of her brain. Her captain already won her over with his words, coupled with the fact that he freed her from her life of torment, when he could have easily kept the collar on her neck and used her for the rest of her life. But his first instinct was to free her. He called them similar people. From that moment she vowed that she would follow him till death, as a way to repay the kindness that he showed to her, for freeing her from her shackles. He already considered her a friend, and it was a good feeling, Shizuku decided. After finally getting over the celebrations, Luffy and his crew boarded their boat, storing away their bounty and untying their boat from the dock. Now that we finally have a competent navigator on the crew, making it directly to islands will be much simpler. You said the next island is Gecko Island, right? That's perfect. I have some business there to attend to at Syrup Village. Shizuku, the wheel is yours. Set us on course, Luffy ordered imperiously as he pointed dramatically out at the ocean. Yes, master, Shizuku answered obediently, causing Luffy to face-plant comically and Kuina to laugh at her captain's misfortune. The outline of Gecko Island could be seen in the distance as the trio steadily approached the island. Sencho, you said you had some business on this island, Kuina inquired. She didn't want to sound nosy, but she was interested in learning more about her captain. Shizuku, although not changing her posture, was also listening into the conversation. Yeah, it a favor for an old friend of mine. I told him I would carry on a message to his remaining family when I set out, Luffy answered, satisfying the curiosity of the girls for now. As they got closer to the island, they heard the sounds of shouting. They spotted a ship, a pirate ship to be exact. It was entirely black with a giant cat head as a figurehead. Luffy didn't recognize the Jolly Roger, so asked Kuina, who would probably more knowledgeable about the pirate crews in the East Blue from her bounty hunting days. Kuina, do you recognize the mark? Luffy asked in a serious tone of voice, showing that he meant business. I may be mistaken, but I believe that it's the mark of the Black Cat Pirates. You might have heard of their captain, Kuro of 1,000 Plans. He had a 16 million bully bounty on his head, but he was captured 3 years ago by the Marines. Coincidentally, the one to capture him was Morgan, before he became Axe Hand Morgan, captain of the Marines. It was that capture that earned him his promotion. Kuina provided. Luffy pulled a face of disgust at the mention of Morgan. I find it highly suspicious that a moron like Morgan, who probably couldn't even wipe his ass without help, probably literally if you think about that axe hand, could capture a guy worth 16 million bully. I mean, Buggy was worth 15 million and he had a devil fruit. This guy Kuro must have been pretty good to rake up that amount in this part of the ocean. I definitely smell a rat. Oh well, not that it matters for now, for I predict some fun on the horizon. I see a rowdy pirate crew looking to loot a village up ahead. Now I wouldn't normally interfere, but I have business here and these punks are in the way. Might I interest you lovely ladies in a spirited afternoon of pirate crew extermination? Luffy asked, with a faux suave tone of voice. Fufufu ... You really know how to treat a lady, Sencho? Kuina replied with a challenging smirk on her face, excited at the prospect of cutting loose. Shizuku tightened the gloves on her hand in preparation as she nodded silently in agreement to Kuina's statement. Shishishi, I'm glad to provide quality entertainment to my 2 favorite girls. Now, let's dock this boat and go crack open some skulls, Luffy ordered, getting an enthusiastic shout from Kuina and a monotone one from Shizuku. As they approached the shore, they noticed the pirates were in the process of offloading. A good lot of them had already congregated on the shore in front of their ship. There was quite a number of them, but none of them really stood out. They were your basic run-of-the-mill grunts, only useful as cannon fodder. Don't take another step if you know what's good for you. I am Captain Usopp. I have 80 million pirates under my command. If you attack this island, I will unleash them upon you, announced a gangly teen from the top of the slope, his knees badly shaking. He was wearing green overalls with a slingshot poised in his hand. The most defining feature, though, was his abnormally long nose. What? 80 million? We can't handle that many. Pack up, boys. We need to get out of here as soon as possible, shouted a strange-looking man with a hat, heart-shaped glasses, and a long chin. But Captain Django, he was lying. One of the grunts deadpanned at his captain. Getting nods of agreement formed the rest of the crew. Hey, he was. Django screamed incredulously, his eyes comically popping out of his skull. They figured it out. Usopp screamed in fear. You little shit. How dare you try to trick me? Men, kill him and carry out your orders. Captain Kuro is counting on us, Django ordered. Luffy, Kuina, and Shizuku, who had just docked and were standing nearby, heard the entire exchange. At hearing Django's final statement, terrifying grins broke out on Luffy and Kuina faces, while Shizuku had an unhealthy gleam in her eyes. Things just got interesting for them. Well, looks like we were right to doubt Morgan's claim. According to these guys, Kuro seems to be alive and kicking. That means that 16 million bounty is ripe for the picking. Like I promised, you can have the guy. Shizuku and I will take out the grunts, Luffy said, causing Kuina to perk up in excitement. Normally she would never go for such a high bounty, but Luffy instilled a newfound confidence in her that made her unafraid to take on such a pirate. All it did now was excite her. With a quick signal to Shizuku, Luffy took off in the direction of the pirate crew. He didn't want to get rusty, so he drew his sword for the first time in a while. The Black Cat pirates didn't even realize what was happening until it was far too late. All an onlooker would have seen was bodies flying to all directions as Luffy and Shizuku carved a path of destruction. Shizuku's mighty fists and Luffy's powerful sword swings were far too much for the untrained grunts of the Black Cat pirates. The sound of bodies dropping, bones breaking, and flesh being sliced was haunting to those who could only look on in astonishment. Django was flabbergasted at the sight of his crew being decimated by 2 teenagers. That shock quickly turned to paralyzing fear, not at the new opponents, but at what his captain will do to him if they don't get the job done. When the last of the nameless grunts fell, he quickly called for reinforcements, remembering that he still had an ace up his sleeve. Get out here, Nyaban brothers, Django shouted towards his ship. On his call, 2 weirdly dressed goons jumped forward. One of them was really skinny while the other was fat. They weren't that impressive as far as reinforcements are concerned. Butchai, Sham, we have to get past that slope, no matter the cost. But as you can see, someone's interfering. Wipe them out, he ordered. Hey, looks like there are some weirdos being sent after us, Shizuku. I'll take the skinny one. You might break him in half with a single punch. You take the other. Luffy drawled out his order, having lost interest in these weaklings. For a pirate crew, one with a supposedly famous captain. They were pathetically weak. The Nyaban brothers were about to put on their regular act of feigning fear before striking when their opponents let their guards down. Unfortunately, no plan survives first contact, especially when Luffy is involved. Just as Sham opened his mouth to speak, Luffy blurred to him before smacking him across his face with the blunt end of his sword. The bad part for Sham was that the grooves on the blunt side of the sword tore small chunks of flesh off his face. He didn't get the time to lament his brutal disfigurement as Luffy appeared above him and dropped both feet on his head, burying him in the sand and sending him into the land of unconsciousness. Luffy looked up just in time to see Shizuku punch Buggy. It was a simple punch with nothing special about it, though Buggy would disagree with that statement as the power behind it sent him flying before comically skidding across the ocean and disappearing into the horizon. Shizuku put her hand above her eyes and looked to the horizon, hoping to see where the large Catman weirdo ended up. It was quite a cute scene to Luffy. Buggy, Sham, Django cried out in despair. The paralyzing fear he felt only escalated when he heard a voice that terrified him more than anything. "What is going here?" shouted a well-dressed man in a black suit and spectacles. He stood at the top of the slope, not too far away from Usopp with a stony expression on his face. Luffy, for his part, didn't even pay the newcomer any mind. He was busy staring at Shizuku and Kuina with an adorable heartbroken look on his face that made both girls' feminine instincts go haywire. They had to work hard to stop themselves from glomping him on the spot and smothering his face in their bountiful breasts. Even the emotionless Shizuku fell victim to it. "These guys are so weak," he complained in a whiny tone of voice that amused both his crew members greatly. Though Shizuku, being the cooter she is, masked it perfectly. Kuro, who was still standing at the top of the hill, was glaring daggers in their direction. Not only did they ruin his plans, they also paid him absolutely no regard whatsoever. It was an insult that he couldn't take lying down. He decided that these brats needed to be taught a lesson in respect. He unlatched the case at his side before slipping on his special gloves that were tipped with almost katana-length blades on each finger. They looked quite menacing. The blades gleamed in the sunlight as Kuro directed his murderous intentions towards the people in front of him. My patience has worn thin. To think, the once mighty Black Cat pirates were taken out like common fodder by a bunch of nameless children. It seems that these years apart have dulled your already feeble minds even further. However, I am going to give you one more chance. Django, go to the mansion and complete your part of the mission before I decide to express my displeasure towards you in a way that you definitely won't enjoy. Kuro ordered in a cold tone of voice that brokered no argument from his former second-in-command who was quivering in his boots. Kuro looked towards the impertinent brats who dared get in the way of his plans, and what he saw made the vein on his forehead throb violently. The boy in black was casually conversing with both his companions without a care in the world, probably saying something ridiculous if his over-the-top hand gestures and the laughter from the girl with the sword was anything to go by. They were completely disregarding his presence. Django, seeing the murderous look in his captain's eyes, took off like the hounds off hell were on his trail. He stepped over the downed bodies of his crew in an attempt to get as far away from there as possible. He knew firsthand how dangerous it was to be in the immediate vicinity if Captain Kuro was planning to fight. The only thoughts in his mind though was getting to the mansion as soon as possible to carry out his orders. Hopefully, after this is done, he can get as far away from his former captain as possible. He didn't get to linger on his thoughts though as he felt a hit on the back of his neck before darkness took over his consciousness. Kuro was startled when he heard the sound of a body hitting the floor behind him. He looked over his shoulder and spotted Django lying in a heap on the ground. He wondered at first whether the idiot tripped over his own feet, but disregarded that notion when he felt his skin tingle and every instinct in his body scream out to him in panic. He noticed that he now had the full attention of the children in front of him. Kuro felt his alarm bells go off when he saw Django's glasses in the boy's hand. The little cretin was somehow able to get past him and back without him ever noticing. For a man that prided himself in his speed, it was a sobering thought. He realized that he needed to take these brats seriously or they could cause his plans even more damage. Kuina, you're up. Don't take him lightly. He got his bounty for a reason. Keep your eyes peeled and expect a few dirty tricks. This isn't an honor duel. It's a fight, and I know I don't have to tell you that you should use every advantage you have. I will intervene if things start looking bad, but I'm positive it won't come to that. I have full confidence in you, Luffy advised with a look of absolute certainty aimed at his first mate. Kuina felt herself heating up under the sureness of his gaze. It still boggled her mind after all these weeks spent with him just how much influence her captain had over her. A single gaze from him could kill any doubts she had in herself in an instant. While she knew in her mind that it wasn't really a healthy relationship to have, it helped her overcome her personal demons for now. She vowed to get stronger though, not just for herself, but for her captain too. With that though in mind, she squared her shoulders and coolly walked towards Kuro. like a lioness stalking her prey. Even her walk was filled with the deadly grace of a superior predator. Kuro didn't feel that way if the sneer he sent towards her was any indication. He was actually insulted that the boy sent a flimsy little girl to fight him when he was clearly the one in charge of their little ragtag group. It was just another insult that the little shit directed towards him. Kuro decided that maybe stringing this girl up by her entrails may soothe the raw fury that he was currently experiencing. One way or another though, none of them were leaving this island alive. There can be no witnesses to ruin his masterful plan. That included the village liar and the rest of his crew. Kuina remained as cool as a cucumber under the deathly glare of the infamous Kuro of 1,000 plans. His mind and body was sharpened and ready for battle. He captain was counting on her to clean up this piece of filth, and she wasn't about to fail him. She closed her eyes and let out a deep breath before snapping her eyes open. She swiftly drew Wado Ikemonji and got into a preparatory stance, inviting Kuro to come and get her. Kuro just looked at her in disdain before taking a few rapid footsteps, causing him to disappear. Kuina's eyes momentarily widened as she was honestly caught off guard, not expecting such speed from the man. It was only her pure, battle-hardened instincts that saved her from being eviscerated by Kuro's claws. She did take a shallow cut to her abdomen though. As she backtracked to regain her bearings, she decided that she needed to take this fight absolutely seriously. Kuro once again started his fancy footwork, but this time Kuina was prepared for him. As he disappeared, she brought her sword up over her back to stop the slash aimed at the back of her neck. Kuro's eyes showed the shock he was feeling, as he never expected the girl to be able to follow his speed. Kuina, for her part, didn't have a hard time following Kuro now that she knew what to expect for the most part. If it was her from a few weeks ago, Kuina had no doubt that she would have been diced into little pieces. But after meeting her captain and experiencing the training that he put her through in the time since they met, Kuro felt like just another bounty. Compared to her captain's speed, Kuro was moving at a snail's pace. She had to work hard to get her eyes and her body to the level that they could at least somewhat track her captain's crazy speed. Kuro was moving much slower in comparison. Now that her eyes had properly adjusted to his technique, she could go on the offensive. As Kuro disappeared once again, Kuina bided her time, suckering him in. Predictably, he went for her back once again. Kuina, anticipating this, was already in the motion of a forward fall. She planted her left hand on the ground and used it as a fulcrum to launch a backward kick to his head that rattled his skull and sent him staggering back. Wasting no time, Kuina kept back up and used her momentum to spin with the flow of her body and slashed across Kuro's unguarded chest, leaving a deep gash that drew quite a bit of blood. It would have been fatal if Kuro didn't have the sense of mind to tilt his body backwards at the last moment. As he staggered, clutching his bleeding chest, Kuina pressed on with her counter-offensive. Elegant slashes were directed at Kuro, forcing him to backtrack, lest he be carved like a Thanksgiving turkey. His head, hand, torso, and even his feet. No place was off limits to Kuina's masterful swordplay. It took every ounce of his being to avoid the strikes from Kuina and wait for some kind of opening. Unfortunately for Kuro, he was still recovering from the surprise injury that Kuina inflicted upon him, as he never expected a no-name girl to be able to follow his speed. He had let his guard down. Kuina wasn't giving him any breathing space as she continued to press her attack. Kuro, knowing that he needed to do something, used the long length that his blades presented his and dragged up some dirt and threw it in her eyes. The unexpected action caused her to stop in her tracks and clutch her eyes in an effort to clean them out. By this time, Kuro was sufficiently composed as he regained his bearings. "I'll admit, you were better than I expected and may have underestimated you a little. No matter, this will end it," Kuro declared, as he started to swing from side to side. He started to go on some long tangent about his master plan, implicating Morgan and Django as well as all the other details that he thought would make it seem like he was a criminal mastermind. But to his immense fury, as he looked around, Kuina wasn't even listening to him. She was busy inspecting her blade, and Luffy and Shizuku were playing an intense game of Go Fish, which Luffy was losing badly. "Oh, are you done yet? Okay, let's continue now that your cliché creepy villain who's about to get his ass kicked monologue is out of the way," Kuina said with a look in her eyes that seemed to say that she was looking at a cockroach. It was filled with disdain and contempt. Kuro, seeing the attitude they were showing him, lost his cool. His swaying finally came to a stop. He looked at Kuina with a bloodthirsty grin and bloodshot eyes that promised pain. "Shikashi," he declared, before disappearing with even greater speed than before. Kuina didn't even look fazed at this development. In fact, she looked bored, so much so that she actually sheathed her sword. The reason was understood a few seconds later as there was a scream of agony that came from behind her. She nonchalantly looked over her shoulder to see Kuro on his knees, with a puddle of blood pooling at his feet. He looked to be in a lot of pain. His eyes were bulging and he was foaming at the mouth. "You, what did you do to me?" he screamed in fury. Kuina just looked at him with an uninterested stare. A real sword wielder can decide what he or she wants to cut. Their precision and finesse with a blade should never be underestimated. You, Kano, are a one-trick pony. You already gave away your greatest strength at the beginning of the fight. If this fight dragged on, I'm sure there was a chance that I would lose. But there was no need for me to have some epic battle with someone that really wasn't worth my time. So when you were still trying to recover from the slash to the chest, and were dodging all my follow-up strikes, you weren't really dodging as well as you thought. I was purposely missing you, only leaving delicate cuts in the places that I wanted. For example, the cut on your Achilles tendon. It was such a minute cut that you probably never noticed it. But extreme pressure on the area of the cut would cause it to tear open even further, disabling you. So you see, Kenta, you never stood a chance against me. For all your vaunted plans, in the end, you fell to one so simple it's actually laughable. Now, I'd love to stay and chat, notice the sarcasm, but my captain has business to deal with here and we have a new bounty to add to our treasury. Goodbye, Captain Kine, Kuina said cruelly before stomping so hard on his head that she actually buried it in the ground. The sound of Kuro's glasses shattering and his nose breaking was cringe-worthy. Thus ended the reign of the man once known as Captain Kuro. He wanted his name forgotten by his enemies. Ironically, his last enemy didn't even deem him worthy of having his name remembered. Damn, if I wasn't such a cold-hearted bastard, I might actually feel sorry for the guy. You really did a number on him, Kuina, just like I knew you would. Good job, Luffy praised as he and Shizuku walked towards her, Luffy giving a cheesy thumbs up in congratulations. In response, Kuina stood up a little straighter and puffed her impressive chest out in pride at being praised by her captain. Happy to have followed his orders. She noticed out of the corner of her eye that Shizuku was staring at her strangely. It may have been Kuina's imagination, but she could have sworn that Shizuku was glaring at her in jealousy. It was hard to tell though, with her having emotionless robot as her default expression. Kuina decided that she was better off not poking at that particular beehive. As Luffy surveyed the battlefield, he noticed the long-nosed team that was opposing the pirates when they first got here. The guy was out cold but seemed to be alive. Luffy threw him over his shoulders like a sack of potatoes and made his way towards the village with his crew in tow. They ran into a young blonde girl on the way who tentatively offered to show them her home so that the boy, who she said was called Usopp, could be treated. You knew my father, really? Usopp shouted in excitement and disbelief. Yeah, his captain, Shanks, docked at my village when I was younger and they stayed for a while. I know about you because you were all Usopp would ever talk about. I honestly feel that I know all about you even though that this is the first time that we've met, Luffy replied. Usopp had stars in his eyes as he heard the stories Luffy told him about his father. Wow, to think that my dad is the sniper on the ship of one of the Yonkou. Usopp expressed his admiration. Yeah, we was a real crack shot. I once saw him pin a fly to a tree by its wings from like 500 meters away. He was scary good, Luffy commented. I promised him that I would seek you out once I started my journey and he asked that I deliver this note to you. They were currently in the lounge of the mansion of Kaya, the young blonde girl that was a friend of Usopp. Said girl was currently fretting over the condition of her butler, Mary. After he was attacked by Kuro, he lost a lot of blood. He was currently out of danger, but it will take a while for him to be back at 100%. It was decided that he will be shipped to an island with a bigger hospital. After reading the note, Usopp had tears of happiness flowing from his eyes at finally having some contact with his father. He declared that even though he wanted to become a brave warrior of the sea, he would stay behind and take care of Kaya for the time being until she was better. Then the both of them will set out on a journey. Said girl just blushed prettily at his declaration, causing Luffy to laugh at their predicament. Kaya offered them the use of the ship her butler built, but Luffy politely declined, saying that they should keep it from themselves for when they set out. After friendly farewells and new friendships forged, Luffy and his crew set sail from Gecko Island. Luffy, Kuina, and Shizuku were currently making their way through Bravi Town on the Tempo Island. It was a relatively average-sized island in the East Blue and one that had a marine base, which was where the crew was heading. They had with them the once presumed dead Captain Kuro, who Shizuku was dragging along without any care for his well-being. What was even more disturbing to Luffy was the exceptional skill that Shizuku displayed with a rope and how intricately she trussed up Kuro. The sadistic glint that she had in her eyes contrasting with her usual emotionless expression didn't help assuage his anxieties either. He decided, for the sake of whatever little sanity that he had left, that questioning his navigator's skills in Shibari was something that his didn't ever need to know. They were met with looks of shock and horror when they slapped Kuro's body on the reception desk of the marine base, many having thought he was dead and many still feared his reputation. The guy in charge of handing out bounties moved mechanically as he left to fetch their 16 million. Luffy was just amused at their reactions. As they waited in the lobby, an interesting exchange made its way to their ears. That bitch has finally gone too far this time. I'm glad that they finally locked her away, said nameless Marine Grunt number 1. She always has been a loose cannon. always arguing against the principles of justice and disobeying orders. She's more like a pirate than a marine if you ask me, replied nameless marine grunt number 2. The only thing she had going for her was her sniping skills, but even that can be ignored when her attitude is so disgusting. I'm glad they are going to execute her tomorrow. It will serve as a good example to other Marines who think of sympathizing with pirates, added nameless marine grunt number 3. Luffy was suddenly very interested in this woman they speaking about. She seemed to be outspoken and a bit rowdy, just his kind of person. Not to mention, she was a sniper. He had hoped that he could recruit Usopp for the position, but the guy had other responsibilities now, and Luffy wasn't prepared to take him away from them. It seemed, though, that his devil's luck came through once again and a seemingly perfect crew member fell into his lap. He had to work hard to keep the maniacal grin off his face. Kuina could only sigh in defeat at the face her captain was making. She had no doubts that he was plotting some manner of mischief. If the conversation that they overheard was any indication, she had a pretty good idea where this was going. She knew she couldn't complain though, as when her captain causes trouble, she knew she would be there right beside him, raising hell. She exchanged glances with Shizuku and a mutual understanding was reached between the two ladies at their captain's probable course of action and how to deal with it. As the three of them walked out of the bounty office, earnings securely in hand, Kuina brought up the topic. So when are we going to do this, Sencho? Kuina questioned. Luffy looked at her with a deer caught in the headlights expression. It was honestly comical at how caught off guard he was by his two girls. You honestly didn't think that we wouldn't figure out what you were up to. I think we both know you well enough now to know when to spot when you are cooking up one of your crazy schemes that will probably cause nothing but trouble. Honestly, you're like a walking calamity, Kuina stated with a deadpan expression on her face. Luffy just seemed sheepish at her comment and rubbed the back of his head with a mild blush on his face. Master, predictable, troublemaker, Shizuku added her own thoughts, causing Luffy to crouch in a corner with a rain cloud above his head. Drawing circles in the ground with his finger, Shizuku tilted her head cutely in confusion and Kuina just rolled her eyes at his behavior, but there was a smile in her face nonetheless. Luffy sprung up from his position, doing a complete 180, and pointing heroically to the sky. I've decided. I will break out this renegade marine sniper and make her part of our crew, he declared dramatically. All he heard in response though was the chirping of crickets in the background. He looked to see both his companions looking at him with deadpan stares that completely deflated him. He pouted childishly before turning and walking back to their ship with the girls in tow, silently amused by his childish behavior. As night fell on Bravy Town, all was silent. The moon provided an eerie backdrop to the uneasy atmosphere of the town. Doors were locked and people decided not to venture out of their homes. In the dungeons of the main base, in a single cell, was a beautiful young woman. She was just above average in terms of height, standing at about 5 feet 7 inches. She was dressed in nothing but rags that barely covered her modesty. It displayed quite a bit of her porcelain skin that was marred with dirt. She had a svelte figure with high C-cup breasts and generous hips. Overall, she had quite a curvy physique. She had long straight green hair that reached down to her lower back with a long set of bangs framing her face with the lower section of her hair tied into a thick braid. Her facial features were sharp, with forest green eyes, and had the underlying threat of danger as one were to cross her. All in all, she had a deadly beauty about her that was both frightening and tempting at the same time. Hypocritical assholes, she swore under her breath as she tried to maneuver her body while attempting to pick up a shard of metal lying on the floor with her toes. She was having no luck thus far and it was compounding her frustrations of the events so far even further. She was sent with a team to patrol the area and did so without complaint. It was the regular routine in her boring life thus far and she carried out her duties mechanically. What really got to her was when she came across her comrades hassling what appeared to be a local woman and her son. They went on a tangent about how her son was the child of a pirate and that they should be thrown in prison or executed for having relations with a pirate. She always considered herself a woman of good character and morals. While she was a bit of a wild child, she was never one to resort to bullying or extortion for kicks. She was always one to be outspoken about the absurdity about the so-called absolute justice and how it went against the very principles of what justice stood. Seeing her fellow Marines treat an innocent woman and child this way, not for the first time, she kind of lost it and attacked them when they started getting frisky with the mother. She couldn't stand people like this. They were no better than the people they were supposed to be arresting in her eyes. Not that she had anything against pirates, but she needed to do something that paid the bills, and with her skill set, this seemed like the safest option. Her actions didn't go unanswered, however, as she was court-martialed and stripped of her clothing and weapons and thrown into this dungeon. She didn't even get a proper meal in 2 days. She was reaching her brink and didn't know how much longer she could last. You seem to be in a bit of a pickle. Perhaps I can be of assistance. A smooth voice called out in the darkness of her cell that made her go rigid in fear. She didn't see anyone coming in, which she would have as it was a small cell. She looked around fretfully and stopped when she saw a pair of purple eyes glowing in the eerie gloom of her cell. The person stepped forward to reveal a handsome-looking young man, probably not a year or two younger than her, dressed in black leather. He had an extremely confident and assured demeanor about him that made it seem like he was always in total control of everything he does. He stopped the middle of her cell, casually standing there and staring into her eyes like he was striping her bare and gazing at her very soul, judging her for everything she was worth. It unnerved her greatly. "Who the hell are you? And how the fuck did you get in here?" she demanded, trying to appear confident and unafraid. But something about this man set her on edge. From the way he looked at her, it appeared that her act didn't really do her any good. "My name is Monkey D. Luffy, and the reason I'm here is to break you out," he commented nonchalantly. Her eyes bugged at his declaration. "Are you crazy? Why on earth would I allow you to do that? I will probably only be here for a few more days before they let me go." She sneered at him. Luffy just shook his head in pity. "Firstly, you couldn't stop me from breaking you out even if you tried. Secondly, and I hate to break it to you, but you are going to be executed tomorrow," he replied without even a hint of sympathy. Her eyes widened at his answer and her mind was going into some sort of denial at what he said. "They announced it to the town just after I got to this island. They are making a big spectacle of it, saying something about showing the town what happens to those traitors who go against the doctrine of the Marine," he added. She was absolutely crushed at what she heard. She wanted to deny what this man was saying, but she knew better. His words made so much sense to her that it was painful. She spent enough time in the system to know how the Marines work, and this sounds like exactly the kind of thing that they would do. She felt like crying at the fate that awaited her, but she didn't want to show any weakness. She was a strong woman. "Tell me, what is your name?" Luffy questioned. She heard the question and looked up at him, almost forgetting that he was there. "Bisca," she replied softly. "Bisca, nice name. Like I said, Bisca, I'm here to break you out. I was actually planning on offering you a place on my pirate crew," he responded. Bisca's eyes snapped to him in bewilderment. "What would make you think that I would want to join a pirate crew of all things? I'm not a bad guy," she declared. Luffy, at hearing her response, let out a long-suffering sigh. He looked at her with a little pity, something that made her flinch as she felt like a little girl being scolded by her teacher. "I didn't think you were that naive. Next you'll probably tell me that all Marine are good guys too, right?" he asked her blandly, causing her face to heat up and look down in embarrassment. She knew firsthand that the world doesn't necessarily work that way. You should know better than anyone that the world isn't all black and white. Not all Marines are good just as not all pirates are bad. I have never, nor will I ever, intentionally hurt innocent bystanders in my business. I may be a pirate, but even I have a moral code that I follow. The reason I became a pirate was for the freedom that it offered me. Freedom to be who I am and do what I want. I love fighting, food, and most importantly, my friends. I only asked because I thought you would make a good crew member. Anyone who can stand up for their beliefs, knowing what might happen, is someone I'd have liked to be friends with. Anyway, you aren't obligated to join. I was going to free you anyways. There is a boat on the far side of the island. You can use it to leave. I would advise getting off the island as soon as possible," Luffy said, before using his sword to cut her free from the shackles that restrained her. Once that was done, he started walking away. Bisca held her head down in a little shame at what Luffy said to her. She was always one of the most open-minded people in the Marines and prided herself on never judging people based on their circumstances, which was why she was ashamed of her reaction. It was something that she would expect from the other idiots in the Marines, the same ones that are planning on executing her. She knew she was on the precipice of a life-changing decision. She didn't know what to do. All she's done to this point was merely to get by. She never entertained any selfish delusions of having grand adventures or dangerous battles. She knew she had to act quickly though. "Wait," she called out to Luffy. He stopped and looked at her over his shoulder. She took a moment to look directly at him, showing him that she was serious. "I'm not stupid enough to think that I won't be labeled as a criminal if I walk out of here. And if I stay, I will probably be killed for doing my job, just so that they can make an example out of me. It may be selfish of me ... but I want to live," she professed strongly, her eyes becoming a little teary at the cacophony of emotions she was experiencing. "It isn't selfish to want that. It isn't a sin to live, Bisca," Luffy told her, his eyes softening and his voice containing the warmth and caring that his other crew members have come to love. "If I come with you, will you promise to never hurt me? I don't want to be some faceless grunt. If I come with you, my name will be dragged through the mud and I will be declared an enemy of the Marines. Can you protect me from that?" she questioned earnestly. "I can't promise that you won't get hurt. I'm planning on making large waves in this world. There will be many enemies, Marines, pirates, bandits, and even bounty hunters. I can't claim to be the strongest, but I have confidence in my strength. I can't always be there, but I can make sure you are strong enough to protect yourself. My crew isn't very large, and I plan on keeping it that way. If you join, it will take our numbers up to 4, you included. What I can promise you is that I will protect you and the rest of my crew to the best of my ability. I will be your friend, colleague, and confidant if you want me to be. My crew will be my family. I have large aspirations. The only thing that can stop me from accomplishing my goals will be death. I plan on being the Pirate King in the future. Are you prepared to take that next step and come with me as I throw this world into chaos? Join my family, Bisca. Luffy answered as he held out his hand to her with a kind smile on her face. Bisca felt his word resonate with her. Ever since she was young, growing up in the orphanage, she always felt that she didn't belong. She always stood out because of her looks and her outspoken attitude. She joined the Marines because it was expected of her. All the orphans joined. She just wanted to fit in with everyone else. She wanted to be accepted. She didn't want to be alone. And now, as she stands here in this cell, it seems what she was searching for all this time found her instead. His words made her chest swell in anticipation. His strength of character and confidence in what he was saying won her over. She knew that her mind was already made up. She could finally find a place that she truly belonged, where she didn't have to hide herself in fear of being ostracized. She looked into those mesmerizing purple eyes and felt herself being drawn in. She held out her hand to him and he took it in hers. She could feel the rough calluses on his palm in contrast to her soft, delicate hand. Very well, I will join you, you silver-tongued devil, she declared with a resigned smile on her face. There was something about this man that just made her want to trust him. She was never one to ignore her instincts, and they were telling her that he was being truthful. She had nothing to lose anyway, so maybe going on an adventure with this crazy pirate may be worth it. Plus, it will be like spitting in the face of those assholes who tried to have her killed for doing her job. She was a little taken aback at the complete 180 he did, in terms of his emotions. His face lit up like the sun and he grabbed her in a celebratory hug, swinging her around, laughing all the while. She was a little confused as he seemed like such a dangerous man, but seeing this side of him made her choice seem all that more appealing. He was a fun guy and she could definitely get down with that. Shishishi, sorry about that. I just got a bit too excited. He apologized while sheepishly rubbing the back of his head, causing Bisca to giggle at him. Her new captain seemed to be a giant softy. Not that she really minded. She preferred this. Seeing her giggle caused him to grin at her. We should probably get out of here as soon as possible. I knocked out the guards in the surrounding area, so we probably have till sunrise to get out of here. More than enough time. I would like to get cleaned up first. I also need to get my clothes and my weapons. We might as well take any ammunition in the base as they won't be needing it anytime soon. Bisca replied. Luffy just looked at her with a sly grin. Look at you, only a minute into piracy, and already planning on looting a marine base. I knew I liked you for a reason, Luffy teased. Bisca felt her blush rising at his comments before she playfully slapped her captain's arm, causing him to clutch it as though she dropped a boulder on him. She just rolled her eyes good-naturedly at his antics, inwardly happy at having chosen to follow this strange yet highly charismatic man. They wasted little time in looting the base for everything that they needed, Luffy's powers coming in real handy for making a stealthy escape. Luffy stepped on his boat to find Kuina running a whetstone over Wado Ikemanji and Shizuku quietly reading a book as she sat in her chair. They both looked up when they heard his arrival. He gave them both a goofy grin and a cheesy thumbs up. Mission accomplished, he announced. I never once doubted you, Sencho. I know firsthand how manipulative you can be. Kuina replied to him. Shizuku nodded her head blankly in agreement. Master, sneaky, she said. Luffy felt the arrows with the words manipulative and sneaky pierce his heart as they spoke the words. He retreated into his corner to sulk at the unfair treatment from his crew. Kuina and Shizuku shared an amused glance at his childish behavior. It's true. I felt like I was selling my soul to the devil. A new voice added. Luffy looked towards the front of the ship to see that Bisca had finally arrived. She had split off from him to go get herself cleaned up and equipped. In contrast to the dirt and rags he saw her in before, her new outfit consisted of a revealing bikini top covered in dark stripes below an open, dark button vest. A similarly colored skirt adorned by a series of light stripes hanging down from it in the middle part covers her lower body, whilst a pair of high-heeled cowgirl boots decorated by matching stripes are on her feet. Also present are a set of armbands circling her biceps, paired by darker, simple long bands around her wrists. Dark red cowgirl hat with a curved-up brim adorned by lighter-colored band covered in large studs. She had 2 flintlock pistols holstered at her hips and 2 more tucked away at the back of her waist. She also carried a large caliber rifle in her hands. Luffy gave an appreciative whistle at her appearance. You clean up nicely, Bisca, he commented. Said woman just blushed a little in embarrassment from his praise. It was a weird feeling for her as he didn't seem to be showing any kind of lust. Just genuine appreciation. Oh, let me introduce you the others. The dangerous-looking lady with the sword is my first mate, Kimishima Kuina. The pirate huntress, Bisca inquired, having heard that name before. Ugh, I never liked that name. Those stupid Marines just started calling me that all of a sudden, Kuina complained. A cooter that reading a book over there is our navigator, Sayatomi Shizuku. He pointed with his thumb, which got him a comically large rock thrown in his direction from the aforementioned woman, not taking too kindly to the cooter comment. Luckily for Luffy, he was able to dodge the large projectile. Bisca just sweat dropped at the antics of her new friends. Clearly they were a free-spirited bunch, maybe a little too free-spirited. Honestly, she was wondering whether she would be able to hang on to her sanity whilst being surrounded by this May crazy. Anyway, introduce yourself, Luffy urged. Well, my name is Busujima Bisca. I'm really good with a gun, and I don't really have any lofty dreams so far. I guess I just want to be free, she said. Luffy just beamed at her, making her feel a little happy at making a good first impression. Her fellow crew members welcomed her with open arms, and she finally felt a little sense of belonging. She decided that it wasn't such a bad choice to follow her new captain. Well, now that introductions are over, let's get out of here as soon as possible. Bisca, do you have everything that you need? Luffy asked. Yes, boss, she replied, causing Luffy to face plant. She just looked at him in confusion. Kuina smirked to herself and Shizuku hid her mischievous-looking eyes behind her book. They both decided that the new girl fit in perfectly. Luffy, my name is Luffy, he protested to a confused Bisca. I know that already, boss, she responded. Luffy just froze in place, with a strained smile on his face. He was honestly freaking Bisca out a bit. She went over to Kuina, who she figured knew him the best. Kuina-san, is the boss going to be okay? She inquired. She could have sworn she heard something shatter behind her. Kuina just looked at her amusedly. He's fine. It's just that our captain has a real flair for the dramatics, she replied. No. Luffy cried out to the heavens at what he perceived was emotional abuse from the girls in his crew, who just ignored him and went about making sure that they could safely set sail. Just another day in the chaotic life of the future Pirate King. It was a beautiful day, with the sun smiling down on the tranquil sea, with nary a cloud in the sky. A cool breeze blew through the air as Luffy and his crew ambled along in their boat. He was currently on the deck, lying on his back with his hands crossed behind his head and his right leg crossed over his left knee, taking in the sight of the clear sky above him. Kuina was towards the back of the boat, taking practice swings with her sword, keeping her skills sharp. While she did win against Kuro, she knew she could have done better. If he was a more competent fighter, she would have been in trouble. She didn't want to be coming up short like that ever again. Shizuku was sitting in her regular chair, reading one of the many books she seems to have in her collection. She was relaxing and enjoying the weather as well, but she was also keeping a close eye on their course. The newest member, Bisca, was cleaning out her pistols and making sure they were ready for action. It was a quiet day for the crew, one that was eventually broken by their captain. On board, he drawled out, Hey Kuina, are there any pirate crews in this area of the sea with a notable bounty that we could go mess up? Luffy questioned eagerly. Sorry Sencho, I haven't been this far out in East Blue. This is unfamiliar waters for me, Kuina replied. Bisca, what about you? You were with the Marines. Any info about this area? I can't be too sure as I was mostly put on patrols around the island. But I think I heard whispers of Don Krieg being spotted in these waters a while ago, she replied. Don Krieg, eh? I think he had about 17 million on his head. That will add nicely to our growing bank balance. Let's get searching then. Shizuku, any islands close by? Negative. Floating restaurant Barady. North, 8 kilometers away. Shizuku blankly answered. Oh, a floating restaurant. That sounds interesting. I am a little hungry. We might even pick up a cook for our crew. It's settled. Shizuku, set course for the Barady, Luffy ordered, before falling back into position, being too lazy to get anything else done, getting a sweat drop from Bisca, who noticed Kuina and Shizuku ignore his behavior like it was a common occurrence. She felt a headache coming along at the thought of the crazy antics her new captain is likely to get up to if his unpredictable personality is anything to go by. As the gang pulled up to the Barady, they took the time to marvel at its unique design. It was a large ship anchored in the middle of the ocean. There were at least 3 levels to it and quite a spacious deck. The strangest part though was the giant fish head figurehead at the front of the boat. Bisca scrunched up her nose at the ugly design while Luffy thought it looked pretty cool. They all noticed the marine ship that was docked beside them, but didn't make any fuss about it as they were currently just bounty hunters. There was no need for trouble, unless they started it. They were forced to prepare a disguise for Bisca though, as they had no doubt that her face would be circulating local marine bases in order to facilitate her capture. With help from Kuina and Shizuku, she was able to put together a reasonable disguise. It would fool most people unless they were much sharper or were deliberately looking for her. Considering the idiots patrolling this part of the sea, Luffy wasn't too worried. Besides, if they did see through the disguise, he would just have to have a private word with them about their treatment of his new sniper, something that would be quite painful for them. They were close to the Grand Line as well, so the guise of being bounty hunters wasn't one he was going to perpetuate like he had before. He would just let things happen and let the chips fall where they will. The group of 4 quietly made their way into the restaurant and took up a table at the far corner. It gave them a good view of all the happenings of the place. Plus, it was close enough to the exit if they needed to make a stealthy getaway. They spotted the Marine that was probably in charge of the ship they saw. He had a horrible fake tan, along with a few scars in his face as well as bubblegum pink hair that made Luffy snicker. His worries about Bisca vanished at the sight of this idiot. The guy was currently going on about all his accomplishments as a lieutenant, clearly trying to impress his date. His breath caught in his throat though, when he spotted a woman coming out of the kitchen. Most of the patrons in the restaurant had their eyes on her as she elegantly made her way across the floor. She was a tall woman, standing at about 5 feet 9 inches. The high-heeled pumps she wore pushed her up to about 5 feet 11 inches. She had golden blonde hair that reached just above her neck and was parted to one side, covering the left side of her face while showing off her curly-shaped eyebrow on the right. Her skin was unblemished and was accentuated by her red lips. One of her most striking features, though, was her piercing red eyes. She was dressed in an elegant maroon gown that hugged the mesmerizing curves of her body. Her breasts were large, at least a D cup, and instantly drew the eyes of many men in the restaurant. The plunging neckline of her dress that showed a tantalizing amount of cleavage didn't help matters at all. The dress reached all the way down to her ankles but had a slit on the right side that went up to just above the middle of her thigh, showing off a provocative view of her alluring legs that looked like they were carved out of marble. The red high-heeled pumps on her feet finished off her ensemble. All in all, she was an extremely beautiful woman, one that was bound to draw attention regardless of where she went. Her eyes, though, were like glaciers as she looked at the Marine captain, whom she delivered a dish to. He tried to flirt with her, in full view of his date whose mood was rapidly declining, but the woman just looked at him like she was looking at a lower life form. It was a look that could shrink the egos of most men. But this guy was either that confident in himself or too stupid to recognize the look. Luffy kept his eye on the woman though. Something about her was different. He couldn't place it, but there was something special about her. As he watched her walk away from the idiot Marine, completely ignoring his advances, he grabbed onto her arm tightly and seemed to threaten her into complying with his demands. The entire staff of the Barady froze at this. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees as the woman glared at the Marine with contempt, before unleashing a storm of powerful kicks that made most of the men present want to curl up into a ball and cry for their mamas. The end result is a bleeding and battered Marine lieutenant who was left in the corner of the restaurant without anyone paying him any mind. The woman dusted herself off and made her way over to Luffy's table, where the occupants were watching her with some interest. "Welcome to the Barady. My name is Ryuju, and I will be serving you today. May I take your order?" she drawled out, while looking at them coldly. Luffy figured that it was probably her default expression. He grinned at her, causing her to raise an eyebrow at him. It was strange for her as she was used to men throwing themselves at her, but this guy just looked at her with interest that had nothing to do with her body. There was no lust in his gaze. She felt like a lab rat under his intense stare. It honestly unnerved her a bit. The stare down lasted a scant few seconds, but Luffy got the answer he needed. He smiled happily as he ordered, "I'll have some meat. 4 servings should do. Oh, and a bottle of sake for the table." "I'll take an order of sushi," Kuina said. Get me a fish and chips." Bisca ordered. "Meat," Shizuku said. "Chicken, fish, rice, sushi, ham, pasta," she continued, causing Ryuju, who was in the process of writing down the order, to freeze in place. She looked at the emotionless Shizuku, who just continued to stare at her blankly, unsure of what was happening. Luffy just laughed at the voracious appetite of his navigator. She was sometime worse than he was. "Don't worry, we have the money to pay for all of that," he advised Ryuju, who just nodded silently, still not breaking eye contact with Shizuku. After a while, she finally collected herself and made her way to the kitchen, away from the strange group. "Shishishi, I think we just found ourselves a cook," Luffy said with a grin. Kuina just rolled her eyes, already anticipating her captain saying that from the beating the woman put on that Marine. Shizuku just nodded silently. She would reserve her judgment until she tasted Ryuju's cooking. Bisca didn't mind. Anyone who beat up a Marine lieutenant without fear like she did couldn't be that bad of a person. After a bit of a wait, their dishes were finally brought out. The crew wasted no time in tearing through the meal. They were surprised at how delicious it truly was. Luffy didn't hold back his compliments. "This tastes delicious. You're a great cook, Ryuju," he complimented. Said woman let out the first smile that the crew has seen from her at the honest praise from Luffy. "It was a good sight. Thank you for your praise. Please enjoy the rest of your meal," she said graciously before making to leave. She was stopped though as a frantic Marine officer came barreling into the restaurant. "Lieutenant Fullbody, sir, the prisoner has escaped," he cried out, but Fullbody was out of it, without any sign of waking up soon. The Marine was cut off from any further action by a bullet to the chest from behind. He dropped to the ground to reveal an emaciated-looking man that looked like he was on his last legs. He had a gun in his hand as he made his way to one of the tables before demanding food. One of the waiters went up to him, and after a small exchange which revealed that the man had no means to pay, he was kicked out of the restaurant after a small beating at the hands of the chef. Luffy noticed Ryuju tense up slightly, before silently making her way to the back. Sensing something was up, he quietly signaled his crew before discreetly following after her. He was now on the roof towards the back end of the boat, watching the exchange between Ryuju and the starving man, identified as Jin. She offered him a free meal. He first refused as he wasn't charity, but Ryuju reiterated that senseless pride isn't worth dying of hunger over. Jin was touched by her kindness and heartily dug into his meal. Their attention was drawn by laughter from above, and they both spotted Luffy crouching in the roof, watching them. Shishishi, I was right about you. You're a good person. He complimented Ryuju, causing her cheeks to pink a little at the compliment that came out of nowhere. I've decided. I want you, he announced, causing her eyes to widen and her blush to increase at the bold declaration. Jin almost choked on his food at the balls Luffy must have had to come out and say that. Ryuju was used to guys hitting on her, but thanks to her reputation as an ice queen, and her father beating up any idiots that tried anything, none of them ever got anywhere. Not that she would ever entertain those losers. But this guy just up and said he wanted her. He didn't even try to put any of the regular moves on her or try to charm her. She wondered if he was a bit touched in the head. She had to admit, though, there was something endearing about him. You can be the cook in my pirate crew, Luffy finished, causing Ryuju and Jin to face plant. Luffy just looked at them strangely before laughing. Shishishi, you guys are funny. Ryuju regained her bearings quickly, though, and stared at Luffy like he was an alien existence. She thought he was hitting on her. Turns out he didn't seem to be the least bit interested in her in that way. She noticed it before as well. She didn't leer at her or stare at her breasts. She wondered if he was gay, but disregarded that thought. He didn't seem to be some playboy, even though she noticed that he was surrounded by 3 extremely beautiful women. If he was a pirate, that made them his crew. It made a little sense that he would come here to recruit. The Bear 80 was known for its good food and fighting cooks. Sorry, but I refuse, she said coolly. To be honest, the prospect of going out to sea was one that was highly appealing to her. It was one of her dreams of sail out into the unknown. But her father was mightily protective of her and didn't entertain thoughts of her joining a pirate crew, even though she received plenty of offers. She didn't begrudge him that, though, as none of those weaklings were ones she would ever want to follow. Well, I refuse your refusal. I've decided that you will be my cook. End of story, Luffy stubbornly argued. Ryuju had a tick mark on her forehead at his response. She wanted to argue a little more, but Jin interrupted their conversation. So you're a pirate. What exactly is your goal? He asked Luffy. Well, I'm going to be the pirate king, obviously, Luffy stated like it was an undeniable fact. Ryuju's eyes widened at the proclamation, and the full confidence he had in his statement. Jin went on to try to warn Luffy against going to the Grand Line, citing his own crew's failure in that endeavor. Once he finished his argument, he looked to Luffy, only to see him with his pinky finger in his nose and a half-lidded stare on his face. Listen when people are talking to you, Jin shouted at Luffy with look of indignation on his face and exaggerated shark-toothed expression. Ryuju held back the urge to giggle at the strange boy's antics, lest she ruin her Ice Queen image. There's nothing to listen. No offense to you, but I don't fear the Grand Line, nor any pirate on it. I have a dream to accomplish, and I will set out to do just that. If it means death, then I'll welcome it with open arms, knowing I did my best to follow my dreams. Luffy answered with a serious look on his face, contrast to what the two were used to seeing from him in the short time that they met. His words, though, echoed within the mind of Ryuju, awakening instincts and desires that she long thought she suppressed. There was something about this guy that drew her in like a moth to a flame. She was honestly a bit disconcerted at that. I see you're giving away food to unpaying customers again, Ryuju, a gruff voice said from behind. He was a stocky-looking old man with a peg leg and an unnecessarily tall chef's hat. He had blonde hair that was tied up as well as a ridiculously intricate braided mustache. Ryuju just scoffed in response. If it bothers you so much, then take it out of my paycheck. Shishishi, there's no need for that. It's on me, Luffy interjected, as he threw a feebly towards the man. I can't have my cook racking up any expenses, he said mischievously, getting a raised eyebrow from the man. Ryuju just exhaled in annoyance at the guy seemingly not taking no for an answer. She waited for the inevitable to happen. That being her father giving this guy a beating of his life for suggesting that she would be his cook before the unthinkable happened. Her father stared intensely at him for a few minutes before smirking at him, something that made Ryuju do a double take. What's your name, kid? He asked. Shishishi, Monkey D. Luffy, future pirate king, Luffy answered with a confident grin. Ha ha ha. It's been a while since I saw a man such as yourself. The name's Zeff. You enjoying my restaurant? Zeff questioned, as he and Luffy started casually walking back to the restaurant side by side, like they were lifelong friends. Shishishi, it's great. The food is delicious, especially Ryaju's, he complimented. Ha, I wouldn't expect anything less from my daughter, Zeff praised heartily. The blush on Ryaju's face was reaching atomic levels, from both pride and embarrassment. Wait, what the fuck just happened? She shouted uncharacteristically. She expected her father to beat the guy up, not to get all chummy with him. She didn't know what to do anymore. It's been 2 days since Luffy and his crew docked at the Barady, and they have been going back every day. Luffy firmly stated that they weren't leaving without Ryaju. The girls, knowing how stubborn their captain could be, kicked back and relaxed in this window that they had. They knew it was inevitable the Ryaju would join, such was the magnetism of their captain. They all fell victim to it, so they know firsthand that it's only a matter of time. Luffy went back daily and constantly invited Ryaju to his crew. Of course his invitations were met with refusals, but it never deterred him. It became somewhat of a contest amongst the patrons and the staff of the Barady as to who will break down first. To the surprise of Ryaju, Zeff just laughed at her predicament, but never forbid her from accepting Luffy's offer. It made her even more curious about Luffy, but she didn't want to make it seem as though she was entertaining his offers, even though she secretly was. Today though, during the peak hours of lunch, Jin burst into the restaurant carrying a bulky-looking man with gold-plated armor, looking to be half dead. He went on to proclaim that he had money and wanted food for his captain, who was identified as Don Krieg. The chefs refused to serve them, citing Don Krieg's underhanded personality, which would probably result in him robbing or killing them. Don Krieg proceeded to grovel on the floor for a meal, something that made the chefs uncomfortable, but they stuck to their convictions. Luffy just watched uninterestedly out of the corner of his eye. So this is supposed to be the famous Don Krieg. He questioned his crew, clearly not impressed by what he was seeing. Apparently, Kuina replied with an equally bored look on her face. He supposedly has 5,000 men under his command. There isn't much special about his apart from that armor which is supposedly indestructible. He uses a lot of dirty trick to get his way though, like feigning submission before turning around and attacking, similar to what we are seeing right now. Bisca commented. Shizuku just continued wolfing down obscene amounts of food without even sparing a glance the way of Don Krieg. They stopped their conversation when they spotted Ryaju coming out the kitchen, carrying a plate of food. The chefs started to shout in protest, but one ice-cold glare in their direction shut them up. They knew better than to mess with her. After serving the food to Don Krieg, who proceeded to stuff his face, she was thanked profusely by Jin. The other cooks looked on uncomfortably at the scene, not sure what to do. They turned to Luffy though, when his voice echoed throughout the quiet restaurant. Hey Ray, you might want to dodge. Luffy called out to her, using the nickname that he decided for her, regardless of her annoyance over it. She only had time to widen her eyes briefly, before nimbly cartwheeling away from ground zero just as Don Krieg's fist plowed through the ground she was standing on. The occupants of the Barady shouted in outrage at the cowardly attack. The patrons that were there all hurriedly ran out the doors and onto their passenger ship, wanting to get the hell away from Don Krieg. That was good. I feel re-energized, Don Krieg commented as he looked around the ship. Isn't this a nice restaurant? I'll take it. The chefs that stayed behind shrieked in fear at his claim. My ship is in ruins. I want a new one. I'm feeling generous today, so leave after you've gotten all of your things. The staff was outraged but were too afraid to voice their thoughts. Jin pleaded with Don Krieg no to do this, but he ignored his second in command. There are still about 100 men alive on my ship. All of them are starving and injured. First, prepare food and water for 100 men. Right away, Don Krieg ordered. Luffy and his crew just watched the proceedings through half-lidded eyes, as Don Krieg proclaimed how nobody ever disobeys him, along with the chefs that were panicking and running around like headless chicken at the thought of following those orders, knowing that those men would eventually attack them. They had to endure the agony of listening to Don Krieg prattle on about how he was the strongest man alive, with a diamond punch and some kind of super armor. Luffy honestly started snickering at what the guy was spouting. Kuina and Bisca were sharing in the amusement, while Shizuku didn't give two fucks about anything other than the delicious meals Ryaju prepared for her. Eventually, his rantings were cut off as Zeff came out with a large bag of food, much to the protest of his staff. He ignored them though and proceeded to taunt Don Krieg with the fact that he didn't even last a week in the Grand Line. Krieg spouted all sorts of bravado about how all he needed was information to conquer the Grand Line and proceeded to threaten Zeff into handing over his logbook, which Zeff refused. Krieg left to go feed his men, claiming that he will be back to claim the restaurant. It was at that moment that Luffy sat up and took notice, drawing the attention of his crew. He looked out the doors with an intense look in his eyes. Sencho, what is it? Kuina questioned, knowing that her captain's senses were second to none. Luffy, through the use of his Kenbenshoku haki, picked up an enormous aura making its way towards the Barady. It was no normal guy, that's for sure. We have company, dangerous company, he warned his crew, who all tensed up in preparation, knowing that their captain was serious. They all walked out to the deck when they heard the sounds of screaming, only to see Don Krieg's flagship galleon sliced cleanly in half. The culprit was spotted immediately as he made his way towards them. It was a single man sitting nonchalantly in a small boat. He was dressed in medieval-style clothing with a burgundy hat and a huge sword strapped to his back. The most striking feature, though, were his piercing yellow eyes. Luffy immediately knew who this man was, Hawkeye Dracula Mihawk, one of the royal Shichibukai. His body tensed up, knowing that his crew wasn't ready for this stage yet. He looked over to Kuina to see her gripping her sword tightly. Luffy ignored Mihawk, who proceeded to demolish the rest of Don Krieg's fleet with a few swings of his sword, and focused his attention on Kuina. Kuina, he called out to her softly. She turned to him with an intense look in her eyes, one that Luffy stared into unflinchingly. They held their stare for a few more minutes before Luffy spoke. You know that I have the utmost confidence in you, but there are some obstacles that pure belief just can't overcome. I won't stop you if you want to challenge him, but know that it will be futile. You are not at his level yet. You will be the greatest swordswoman in the world one day, of that I have no doubt. But that day doesn't have to be today. We still have a long way to go, and I don't want to see you hurt unnecessarily. So I'm asking you, not as your captain, but as your friend, do you really want to risk yourself right now? He asked as he continued to stare her down. Kuina knew what her captain said was true, and she knew that he would never discourage her from a fight unless it was so badly against her. She wanted to draw her sword right now and go slashing towards Hawkeye, but her absolute trust and faith in her captain stayed her hand. He had never once led her astray, and she would not begin to doubt him now. She let out a defeated smile as she relaxed her grip on her sword. Her captain was just too good at convincing her. Luffy smiled at her decision. Don't worry, this won't be the last time we see him. By that time, our name will be resounding throughout the world. Luffy finished with a smirk as he grabbed her in a one-armed hug, which only caused her to roll her eyes in exasperation. They didn't know it, but there were a few people listening in on the exchange. Ryuju was once again impressed by Luffy's charisma and his ability to instill loyalty into such a powerful-looking woman. He was becoming more and more mysterious by the day. Zeff just nodded his head in approval, already realizing the kind of man that Luffy is and glad that he was proven right. Mihawk heard the exchange and rose an eyebrow in interest. Normally, he wouldn't care about such flies. But the boy, who he assumed was the captain of the young swordswoman, had an alarmingly powerful presence about him. He noticed it before he even got to the restaurant. This boy was one to look out for in the future. The fact that he had such a level head on his shoulders and could motivate and inspire his subordinate with just a few words was quite a sight as well. He made a note to watch out for the young man. Mihawk turned his attention to Don Krieg, who was the only one standing from his crew, the others having been taken out easily. Mihawk sent Lazy Slash in his direction, causing a wind blade to rocket towards him. Don Krieg, being the bozo that his is, assumed his armor would protect him. He was wrong. However, instead of Don Krieg being split cleanly in two, as most expected to happen, Don Krieg was kicked out of the way of the wind blade by Luffy, saving his life. Most of the people on the barricade looked on in shock and confusion at his action, but Luffy ignored them and turned his attention to Mihawk. While I don't mind to having fun with his crew, I don't appreciate you trying to kill this guy. He has a reasonable bounty on his head and I plan to add that to my wallet. Plus, he is due to serve as a training exercise for my navigator. Luffy spoke casually, causing the onlookers' eyes to bug out at what he said and the way he stood against Mihawk, who for his part just rose a single eyebrow in amusement. Tell me your name, boy. Luffy sent him a challenging smirk in response. Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will be Pirate King, Luffy announced, to the shock and amazement of his audience. The pretty lady with the sword is my second in command, Kimishima Kuina. Remember that name, for she will be the one to dethrone you in the future. There was a stunned silence at this declaration before the sound of chuckling rang out. Mihawk was chuckling to himself at the audacity of this boy to so fearlessly declare something like that to his face. Very well, Monkey D. Luffy, Kimishima Kuina, I sit atop the world. I eagerly await the day you get to my level. I will be looking with interest at what you can accomplish, Mihawk declared before swiping his sword down, causing a whirlwind to kick up. Once it dissipated, Mihawk and his boat were gone. Luffy just rolled his eyes at the theatrics. He looked over to his first mate and was pleased to see the fire burning intensely in her eyes at the challenge. She looked at him and gave him a confident nod and a smirk, conveying that she understood his intentions. Luffy heard Don Krieg rushing him from behind. It was so slow that Luffy probably had time to knit himself a sweater. When Krieg finally got close, Luffy backhanded him away casually, like he was swatting a fly, much to the shock of his spectators. Shizuku, I let Kuina have the last bounty. This one is yours. Make sure not to kill him though. They pay more if bounties are still alive. Being close to death is fine though. Go as wild as you want, Luffy called out to his navigator. who hurriedly finished her meal before robotically making her way out onto the deck. The spectators were looking at him like he was crazy for sending the silent girl to fight the strongest man in East Blue. Don Krieg got back to his feet and was fuming at the way he was being treated. He is Don Krieg, the strongest man in the world. For that little shit to think this weak little girl could pose a challenge to him was an insult he could not take lying down. You will regret sending your little girlfriend to fight me, boy. I'll make sure to send her back to you in pieces. Don Krieg roared, frothing at the mouth. He went on a tangent about his greatness and how he's the strongest in the world, causing Luffy to roll his eyes at the size of the ego on the guy. He could see, though, that Shizuku was getting impatient. He spent enough time with her to pick up the subtleties of her body language. She no doubt wanted to get back to her feast, and listening to this jackass monologue about himself was not in her agenda. After a few more minutes, her patience wore out. She took a great leap off the piece of driftwood she was standing on, causing a large amount of water to be kicked up from the force of the jump, and headed straight for Krieg. It took him a while to notice, but when he did, he just smirked, wholly confident that his armor was impenetrable. He was in for a rude awakening. Shizuku landed in a crouch in front of him, before lashing out and grabbing him by the neck like a viper. Krieg was caught off guard by this, but didn't have time to contemplate that as Shizuku's fist barreled into his chest cavity with all the force of a freight train. The wind was knocked out of him completely. What made matters worse was that his armor was dented badly. Not that he knew that. It wasn't the end, though, as Shizuku held him in place and proceeded to lay into him like a woman possessed. The sounds of crunching and cracking as well as blood flying everywhere, from Krieg's armor breaking and his bones shattering, from the force of Shizuku's inhumanly powerful punches was too much for some to watch. There was a whole lot of puking being done by most of the chefs who were witnessing the scene. Luffy and his crew were simply amused at the normally mild-mannered Shizuku beating the stuffing out of Don Krieg, probably just so that she can get back to eating as quickly as possible. Ryuju was shocked that the quiet, unassuming girl with the large appetite could be this vicious. To see her manhandle the most powerful pirate in East Blue like he was a toddler was an eye-opening experience. She wasn't even the captain of their crew. Hell, she wasn't even the second in command. What did that say for the rest of them? Just how powerful was that guy to have the loyalty of such powerful fighters? After about a minute more of the vicious one-sided beating, Shizuku let up her punches. Don Krieg was reduced to nothing more than a bloody piece of meat. His face was badly swollen. His teeth were missing. His nose was broken in at least 6 different places if that was even possible, not to mention both of his eyes were swollen shut. It was a horrific sight to witness. The perpetrator of such brutal violence, though, didn't even change her expression. She still had the same emotionless look on her face as she held Krieg up for her captain to see, seemingly displaying her victory. Shishishi. Good work, Shizuku. I knew he wouldn't be a problem for you. As a reward, you can order the entire menu of the Barady. Luffy shouted out to her, seemingly unaffected by the brutality that she displayed. If anything, he looked impressed. The gleam that entered Shizuku's normally emotionless eyes at her captain's proclamation made most of the chefs shiver in apprehension. There was something seriously wrong with these people. Thank you, master, she answered back dutifully, before lugging Krieg's unconscious body with her back to the restaurant. Everyone scrambled out of her way as she walked to her captain. When she got to him, she dropped Krieg at his feet and just stared at him, seemingly trying to convey something. After a while, a light bulb went off in Luffy's head as he remembered his interaction with Kuina a while ago when she fought Kuro. So he gently reached out and patted Shizuku's head, causing the stoic woman to seemingly preen under his attention. Kuina clicked her tongue in annoyance at the scene and Bisca looked a little put out at the display. Ryuju just gave up trying to figure these wackos out. They were clearly too far outside the scope of sanity to understand. That didn't stop the smile on her face though as she looked at them, something that Zeff noticed. After leaving Shizuku to her feast, with Luffy watching over her, Kuina and Bisca hauled Krieg back to their boat where they proceeded to shackle him to the mast as tightly as possible. They were nowhere near the level of skill of Shizuku with a rope, but they weren't too shabby either. As the sun started to set, Luffy once again walked up to Ryuju, as he has been doing for the past 3 days. "What's your dream, Ray?" he questioned out of the blue, catching her off guard. He normally just asked to join him, so this was a bit new. It didn't deter her though, as a happy smile blossomed on her face as she excitedly told him about the all blue. Luffy smiled in response to her exuberance and posed the question to her once more. "Are you ready to join my crew yet?" Ryuju only exhaled in annoyance, though even that was artificial, as it was obvious that she was struggling with herself. "I told you before, I'm not going to join. Why don't you just join him already?" Her sentence was cut off by Zeff, who she turned to in shock. "What? Don't look at me like that. You obviously want to join him, we can all see that. But you're being far too stubborn. How can you say that to me? You're the one that's always rejecting these offers on my behalf. I thought you wanted me to stay here. How can I leave when I owe you so much? Ryuju argued, with her eyes becoming a little misty. I only rejected those offers because those weaklings didn't have what it took to make it. That boy right there, he's the real deal. These old eyes can tell. I want you to be well taken care of and happy. He can make that happen. I know you yearn for the open seas, just like I used to. You are my daughter after all, and I couldn't be more proud of you. So go out there and fulfill both our dreams, Zeff told her with a soft smile on his face. That caused the dam to break as Ryuju grabbed her father into a tight hug and bawled her eyes out onto his chest, thanking him for all that he's done for her and promising to come back someday. Luffy offered to stay for a few more days, but Ryuju said they should leave now before she changes her mind. It was a tear-filled goodbye as the gang set off from the Bar 80, with a new crewmate and new promises to fulfill. The crew of 5 spent the next few days getting to know each other better. They trained together, they ate together, and they relaxed together. Luffy was happy with the way things were turning out. He recruited 4 powerful warriors into his crew, something he wasn't hopeful of being a possibility here in East Blue when he set off. But whether it was his ridiculous luck, fate, or just a simple coincidence, he somehow gathered the cream of the crop and he wasn't about to complain about it. He felt that right now, his crew was ready to head off to the Grand Line. He would have preferred to recruit a doctor, but the doctors here in East Blue were fairly average. He wanted someone exceptional. He wanted someone who wouldn't be daunted by the bizarre nature of the Grand Line and all the ailments that came with it. That isn't to say that he wouldn't pick up a promising doctor if he came across one before, but he didn't see that happening. For now, they would have to watch out for each other, and if they were in a pinch, he would take care of his crew's injuries. The crew was currently docked at a small island with a marine outpost for cashing in bounties. He sent Shizuku, Ryuju, and a disguised Bisca to turn in Krieg and pick up some supplies for them. He chose those 3 as he wanted them spend some time together bonding while they were out shopping. His other reason was that he wanted some time alone to speak with his first mate. He looked to Kuina and saw her face looking blankly ahead. She's been uncharacteristically quiet ever since the Bar 80. I'm sorry, Luffy suddenly blurted out, immediately getting Kuina's attention. She looked at her captain with confusion at his spontaneous apology. Sencho, what exactly are you apologizing for? Luffy looked away from her with a guilty expression on her face, which made her all the more concerned at her captain's uncharacteristically somber mood. Back at the Bar 80, I prevented you from fighting Mihawk. I know of your ambition to be the greatest, yet I prevented you from challenging him. I feel as though I got in the way of your dream. I don't know if you are feeling the same, but I don't want you to think that I'm standing in the way of your ambitions. It worries me that you may think that I don't have faith in you, which isn't true at all. I do. It's just, Luffy explained contritely before he started to ramble towards the end, much to the amusement of his second-in-command. She was flabbergasted at the beginning of her captain's explanation, before her face eventually melted into a soft smile at him. Sencho, she called out to him. He still didn't stop rambling on incoherently. She just rolled her eyes good-naturedly at his behavior. Luffy, she said quietly. That immediately got his attention. He went rigid and looked at her in astonishment. That was the first time that he had ever heard her speak his name. She just smiled gently at him. You have nothing to apologize for. I admit, when I saw Mihawk, I wanted to fight him. It wasn't even something I gave thought to. It was more instinctual, I guess, at seeing my goal right in front of me. But you were right. I wasn't ready for him yet. I realized that to challenge him as I am now would be disrespectful, not only to him but to myself as well. It was just a few weeks ago that I was chained to a crucifix at the base of a false lieutenant. But after traveling with you, after learning what you had to teach, I can feel myself getting stronger. A month ago I wouldn't have even dreamed of taking on a guy like Kuro. But a few weeks with you, and he wasn't even a fight worth mentioning. I know full well that your faith in me is unshakable. And it's that faith that gives me strength to keep pushing my limits. I know that I wasn't ready for that stage yet. I agree with you in that there is no rush. We have a long journey ahead of us, with more strong opponents to come, against which I can sharpen my blade. Mihawk won't be going anywhere, so don't apologize, my captain. Without the belief and confidence you have given me, I would still be aimlessly wandering East Blue with no clear path. Kuina finished with a grateful look at Luffy, whose smile at that moment could light up the sky in its brightness. Phew, I'm glad. I was worried you would be mad at me, Luffy said, looking like a burden has been lifted off his shoulders. Do you really think I've helped you though? Of course, you may not realize this, but you are much more powerful than any other guy in this part of the ocean. The bounties I've faced don't even come close to you. Just sparring with you on a daily basis has allowed me to raise my level in the hopes of matching you. I'm still not anywhere close. But as a result, I'm much stronger than I used to be and therefore can handle opponents now that I may not have been able to before, like Kuro. I can feel myself getting stronger every day, Kuina replied. Luffy just rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment at the praise he was getting. I didn't think of it like that, but I'm still nowhere near the level of a guy like Mihawk though. I didn't say you were. but compared to the fodder in East Blue, you're nigh untouchable. Besides, you're getting stronger every day too, right? We're a team now. We'll all get stronger together and take on anyone that comes our way," Kuina declared passionately with her fist raised to the air. Luffy just laughed happily at Kuina's unusually boisterous mood. "Well, looks like you guys are having fun," said the familiar voice of Ryuju. Luffy and Kuina turned back to see them and raised an eyebrow at Ryuju's outfit. It was the same one she wore before, but it was in black, and she had the symbol of a red moon on the left breast area of her dress. The same went for Shizuku and Bisca, who swapped out the dark red in her clothes for black, including her hat. "Okay, did I miss something?" Luffy questioned quizzically with a tilt of his head. The girls resisted the urge to coo at the cute gesture. "Well, the both of you wear black and you both have this symbol on your clothes, so I thought that we should follow along. Kind of like an official uniform," Ryuju explained coolly. Luffy just scratched his head in confusion. "I like black. It's my favorite color. And the red moon is something of a way to pay respects to my mother. I once read in her diary that she gave birth to me under the red moon. I thought it was a nice homage to her," Luffy clarified, getting looks of understanding from his crew. "Well, there's no reason that it can't be our symbol," Bisca added enthusiastically. "I agree," Kuina added with her arms folded. Shizuku just nodded sharply, signaling her agreement. I guess that would make us the Red Moon Pirates," Ryuju suggested. Kuina, Shizuku and Bisca all gave nods of approval at the name. "Wait, if we're going to use the symbol, I have a better idea. The red moon is also sometimes called the blood moon. The blood moon pirates sound a lot cooler in my opinion," Luffy proposed, getting looks of approval from his crew. "Sounds intimidating." "I like it," Bisca commented. "Indeed," Ryuju added. "It certainly sounds ominous," Kuina said. Shizuku on the other hand pulled out a sketchpad from goodness knows where and stared drawing something. The others were observing silently as their navigator got to work on something. When she was done, she flipped her sketchbook towards Luffy, whose eyebrows rose in wonder. The girls all whistled at the amazing work from Shizuku. "So you say that should be our symbol?" Luffy questioned, getting an emphatic nod from his navigator. He broke out into an excited smile. "Do you think you can paint it on a flag, as well as the sail?" he asked. She nodded once again, before getting to work carrying out her task. The others watched her work, impressed at her talent. Neither of them were really artistically inclined, so they didn't bother trying their hand at painting. It took her a little under an hour, but Shizuku got the job done. Luffy just whistled in appreciation. "Excellent work, Shizuku," he praised, causing the silent navigator to puff her chest out slightly in pride. "Shishishi ... With this, the Blood Moon Pirates are born," he announced, getting cheers from his crew, who started to celebrate with some sake that they passed around as well as the excellent food that Ryuju prepared. "I was thinking, we have what we need for now. I think it's time for us to head to the Grand Line. There aren't any more bounties here and we have enough money to get a decent ship made," Luffy commented. The others looked thoughtful at his suggestion, but they were interrupted by Bisca correcting her captain. "You're wrong, boss. There's still one more bounty left." Regardless of what people said, Don Krieg was only the second highest bounty currently in East Blue. The highest belongs to the fishman Sawtooth Arlong, captain of the Arlong Pirates. He has a bounty of 20 million bully. I've heard some bad rumors about him. Suffice to say, he's far above some idiot like Don Krieg, Bisca informed them. Luffy paused upon hearing that, before a terrifying grin appeared on his face. It caused the girls and his crew to shiver a little in apprehension at his obviously evil intentions. "A fishman, you say? Shishishishi. Great. I thought the training exercises were over. This will be a great test for our crew. It is said that fishmen are apparently 10 times stronger than the average man. If this guy has a crew of fishmen at his disposal, they will pose a good test for us. Not to mention the perfect debut of the Blood Moon Pirates, taking out the largest bounty in this sea," Luffy explained excitedly. The looks of resigned acceptance on the faces of his crew would have been comical to him if he had been paying attention. But he wasn't. He walked with purpose to the front of his boat and pointed dramatically toward the horizon. "Shizuku, set course for..." He stopped dead in tracks, still stuck in his pose. There was absolute silence on the boat for about a minute, before Luffy shyly turned around, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly as he took in the deadpan stares his crew was giving him. "Tishishi, guess I got a little too excited." "You think?" Kuina jabbed with half-lidded eyes. Bisca just rolled her eyes at her captain's antics. "From what I've heard, Arlong supposedly set up base in the Kanami Islands," she provided. Luffy perked up at that piece of information. "You've heard the lady. Let's get this show on the road," Luffy exclaimed. The girls looked exhausted at his antics, but the smirks on their faces betrayed those thoughts. They were looking forward to a good fight just as much as their captain. It was a scene that was the basis of so many nightmares for Nami as she watched the people of her village pick up rusty pitchforks and pieces of timber and proceed to march towards Arlong Park, to their death, after all the years she spent under the thumb of the man who murdered her mother in an attempt to free her friends and her family. She lied, cheated, and stole from so many people to complete her self-appointed mission. But it seems that for all the world she experienced in her travels, she was still far too naive. She had finally gathered the 100 million bali that she needed to free Kakuyashi village from Arlong's grasp. He had promised her that if she gathered that amount, she could buy back her village. She sailed back to her village with hope blossoming in her chest for the first time in 10 years. She had finally done it, but it seems that she was only fooling herself. After only having been back on the island for a few hours, she was accosted by the Marines, led by Captain Nezumi of the 16th branch. She immediately knew something was terribly wrong. They accused her of being a thief, along with other petty crimes that weren't even worth mentioning compared to the injustice occurring in their island at the hands of Arlong. When the citizens pointed this out to him loudly, he just had a smug smile on his face. As a result, the 100 million that Nami had gathered was confiscated, but not before Nezumi accidentally letting slip that he knew the exact amount she had beforehand. Nami knew that Arlong was behind this. There was no other way for Nezumi to have known. It also explained why there was never any help afforded to them by the Marines. Arlong had a Marine captain in his back pocket. Nami was absolutely heartbroken at what had happened, but she tried to keep a smile on her face for the villagers. She said that she would gather the money again and eventually buy back the village. But the villagers decided that enough was enough. They picked up their makeshift weapons and marched towards Arlong Park to avenge the atrocities that were committed against them as well as the abuse suffered by Nami at the hands of that monster. Nami ran in front of them and begged them to stop, but none of them listened. Her sister, Gecko, told her that the people had reached their breaking point and nothing could stop them now, despite the fact they knew they were marching to their deaths. She could do nothing but watch on, with tears streaming down her face as Genzo, the town mayor and a man she looked up to as a father figure, stared down Arlong and declared their intentions of resistance. If anything, Arlong simply looked amused at their efforts. He took a perverse delight in the suffering he was inflicting on Nami. He allowed Genzo to give a rousing speech about how they were going to be rid of him today. Not that Arlong paid much attention. Shahaha ... You inferior human filth, have some nerve, raising your weapons to your betters after all the care that we have given you. Arlong mocked, infuriating the villagers further. It ends today, Arlong, one way or another, Genzo shouted, getting cheers of approval from the people. Please stop. There's no need to do this. I can gather more money. Nami tried one last time, but her argument fell on deaf ears. I'm sorry, Nami. We've watched for 10 years as you've endured the pain and loneliness, just so that you could free us. But we will end your suffering today, Genzo proclaimed, getting even more shouts of approval from his fellow villagers. Name couldn't stop the tears, from sadness, grief, despair, and a little happiness at the end. She saw the resolve on the faces of the villagers, and she knew that nothing she said could change their minds. She pulled herself together, assembled her staff, and stood by the villagers ready to fight with them. Such insolence. I see you finally lost your mind, Nami. Not that I'm surprised. It looks like I have to teach you weaklings a lesson once again about the superiority of the fishman race. Kill them, boys, but make it as slow and painful as possible. But leave Nami for last. I want her to watch as all those she loves are brutalized. Shahaha, Arlong ordered cruelly. The bloodthirsty smirks on the faces of the surrounding fishmen immediately put the villagers on edge. This wasn't how they planned on things happening. They were honestly terrified of the scenario that Arlong outlined. They weren't afraid of dying. But the thought of Nami being forced to watch them suffer made them hesitate. It happened just as the fishmen were about to attack. It was a sound, a strange sound, one that was totally out of place in the tense atmosphere of Arlong Park, which was why it stood out so much as to grab their attention. All action stopped in Arlong Park as the inhabitants strained their ears to pick up the source of the sound. After a few seconds, it became clearer. It was the sound of someone humming. More precisely, it was the sound of someone humming a silly tune. They got their answer, though, as the source of the humming came sailing into the park. It was a medium-sized boat, with not much to distinguish it from others of its kind, with the exception of the menacing-looking Jolly Roger painted on the black sail. It was a more narrow and angular skull compared to the standard. It had sharp, narrow eyes, with a large, jagged set of teeth. It was pure white on top of what looked like a red moon with blue arcs of electricity painted around it. And, divided by for a visual, think of Ikugo's hollow mask without any of the markings for the skull. The flag is inspired by the Japanese flag, but with the base being black and the red circle painted to look like a moon with the skull and crossbones on top of it. Divided by all in all, it was extremely intimidating. What was less intimidating, though, was the young man in black, standing at the front of the ship, with his arms crossed, his long black hair and coat flapping dramatically in the wind and his intense purple eyes piercing the space in front of him. He was flanked by 4 extremely beautiful and dangerous-looking women. It would have been an awe-inspiring sight, if it weren't for the fact that he seemed to be humming his own theme music. Pananana na 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 pananana. 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 Every occupant in Arlong Park stopped what they were doing to stare at the sheer ridiculousness that they were witnessing. There were sweat drops and deadpan stares directed at the entrance of these obviously mentally challenged people. Bisca looked a little embarrassed, if the tinges of pink on her cheeks and her shifty eyes were anything to go by. Ryaju's expression was as cold as ice as she stared down the Arlong pirates. She completely disregarded everyone's presence and just stood regally next to her captain, seemingly unbothered by his antics. She was focused and ready to act on his orders. Shizuku, as always, was completely immovable in her expression and oblivious to the situation. Whether it was that she didn't care about being embarrassed, or that she didn't realize that her captain was actually doing something embarrassing, Bisca would never know. Kuina, on the other hand, looked like she was pumped up. Her foot was tapping along with the tune her captain was humming, and she looked to be really getting into it, if the sharpness of her posture and the intensity of her eyes were anything to go by. Bisca just looked at her with a deadpan stare, realizing that she was a lost cause from the very beginning. As the boat came to a stop in the bay of Arlong Park, Luffy's humming stopped and his intense gaze swept across the scene. Suddenly the tension rose dramatically. Luffy looked far more dangerous now that he stopped humming, and the villagers and even some of the fishmen gulped audibly at the dangerous vibes he was giving off. Nami was shocked. She immediately recognized Luffy and Kuina from Orange Town. They were the two that effortlessly destroyed Buggy the Clown and his crew. As Luffy's gaze continued to scan the area, the occupants waited with bated breath for what he would say. Such was the commanding nature of his presence. As he opened his mouth, they led it forward in anticipation. "Which one of you is Alfred?" Luffy thundered. People face planted at how anticlimactic his question turned out to be. Even Arlong had to sweat drop at the stupidity he was seeing. Bisca face palmed hard at her captain's antics. Shockingly, though, a middle-aged man timidly stepped forward from the crowd and shakily raised his hand. "Hi, I'm Alfred ... sir ... the man stuttered out, with whole body trembling in fear. Luffy's sharp gaze immediately zeroed in on the man, and Kuina slowly stared to unsheath her katana, causing him to tremble even more. The poor man looked like he was about to have a nervous breakdown. Tears and snot were started streaming down his face, and a wet spot could be seen appearing on his pants as Luffy's ill intent was directed at him. "Well, you certainly are one ugly motherfucker. Just what I'd expect from a notorious fishman with a reputation as disreputable as yours. I find it hard to believe, though, that the Marines put a 20 million bully bounty on a flaky character such as you," Luffy drawled out. Realization set for the villagers as they figured out who he was really talking about. They didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or be fearful. The strange man completely dissolved any tension they may have been feeling with his ridiculous action. "Boss, it not Alfred. It Arlong. Arlong. And he's a fishman. He the one sitting on the chair over there," Bisca pointed out exhaustedly. Luffy perked up at that and hit his palm with his fist in comprehension. He turned to the poor guy he had frightened. "Shishishi, sorry about that, Alfred. That was my bad." He apologized insincerely. Poor Alfred just sobbed in relief at not being the focus of Luffy's attention anymore. "Shahaha ... so some puny human thinks he can just barge into my home. Who are you, weakling? A bounty hunter, perhaps? Or did you come here to bow to the might of the fishman race?" Arlong challenged arrogantly with his arms outstretched. Luffy, on the other hand, just looked at him in pity. Something that Arlong seemed to pick up on as it infuriated him at some no-name weakling looking down on him. First of, "I'm not a bounty hunter, as any person with half a brain cell could distinguish from the Jolly Roger on my sails," Luffy said slowly, taking care to pronounce each word, like he was speaking to a particularly dim-witted child. "Second, as stated, I'm a pirate. Rules about property and crap like that don't really apply to me. Is that easy enough for you understand? Or do you need me to draw a picture for you to comprehend it? My navigator, Shizuku, is quite a talented artist. I'm sure she can whip you up a picture book if you're stuck." Luffy finished, with Shizuku pulling out her sketchbook and art supplies. The rest of his girls didn't even bother to hold back their giggles at his remarks. The villagers looked on in shock at the audacity of the newcomer. Never in their wildest dreams did they imagine someone having the gall to speak to Arlong in such a way. Speaking of the resident dictator, he had a vein on his temple that was throbbing violently at the nerve of what he perceived as an inferior human. "Before I beat the superiority of the fishman race into your thick skull, tell me your name, trash," Arlong said menacingly. Luffy just raised an eyebrow at him. "Normally I wouldn't bother giving my name to every piece of cannon fodder I come across, but I'm feeling particularly generous today. My name is Monkey D. Luffy." The man who will be Pirate King. Remember that fish face? Luffy answered with a smirk that infuriated Arlong. He didn't get time to dwell on that though. Shizuku, Luffy called out, said woman immediately stepping forward. Since you got to take out Ding Kong the last time, I think it's only fair that the others get to have a chance for a good fight. He seems to have 3 other officers around him. Leave those to the others. For now though, take out the rest of the trash. Luffy ordered with a stony look on his face, his demeanor doing a complete 180 from his previous playful personality. Yes, master. Shizuku nodded in obedience before exploding into action. She leapt off the boat and landed right in the middle of the grunts of the Arlong pirates. She wasted no time in unleashing her devastating fists on the unsuspecting fishmen. So used to their dominance over the weak villagers, they were wholly unprepared for the pure power she unleashed upon them. She swiftly dodged under sloppy punches and lazy kicks from the grunts, who were clearly untrained and spent far too many years sitting on their asses to even pose a fraction of a challenge to the inhuman nature of Shizuku. She dispatched them with the ease one would show when stomping ants. Solid punches sent fishmen flying in all directions, bones breaking like twigs under the force of her blows. Try as they might, they didn't stand a chance in hell against her now that she was carrying out her captain's orders. The villagers looked on in shock and awe, disbelief painted clearly on their faces as they watched a single woman dispatch the majority of the Arlong pirates like they were cannon fodder, which to her, they were. An unfamiliar feeling blossomed in the hearts of the villagers as they watched the carnage. The feeling called hope. Arlong clutched his armrest tightly, causing it to crumble under his strength. He was enraged by the scene he was witnessing. His brothers were being swatted like flies, and by a single woman at that. He could barely control his temper. It took no more than 3 minutes for Shizuku to completely eradicate the grunts of the Arlong pirates, and she did so with alarming ease. Bodies were strewn all over the park. Broken bodies, bleeding bodies. Even the villagers had to cringe at the brutality that were inflicted upon the fishmen by this single woman. Said woman just robotically turned back and made her way to her captain. Mission accomplished, master, she intoned. Luffy just smiled at her proudly and patted her head once again, causing her to seemingly revel in his attention, if the triumphant glint in her eyes directed at her fellow female crewmates were any indication. The 3 of them didn't respond to her provocative actions, but they did twitch in annoyance at her actions. Unforgivable. For you inferior humans to come here and do this, I will kill you all. Arlong roared. Arlong, take it easy, Chew. We will handle it from here, Chew. There's no need to get your hand dirty with these weakling, Chew. A fishman with strangely big lips said as he stepped forward, followed by a large-framed fishman with weird elbows and one with 6 arms. They appeared to be the officers of the Arlong pirates. Another weirdo appears, Luffy commented. I don't want to hear that from someone like you, Chew. The big-lipped fishman retorted. Well, there are 3 moderately strong opponents before us. Please note the biting sarcasm in my voice. Luffy drawled out with half-lidded eyes, causing tick marks to appear of the foreheads of the mentioned 3. Kuina, you take the octopus. Ray, the Bruce Lee wannabe with the messed-up elbows is yours. Bisca, you take out the weirdo with the suspiciously pouty lips. I don't really want to know what he does with those lips of his, Luffy ordered, before whispering the last part loudly for all to hear. The red face on the lip guy made a few guys shift uncomfortably. The girls just nodded in acceptance before speeding towards their opponents. Luffy just folded his arms imperiously and stared down Arlong with a confident smirk on his face. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.